Chapter 2071. I wasn't careful just now. This time, I won't go easy on you. Prince Giant Pain roars. Take this. He instantly summons a long sword from his conscious and slashes it straight at Mo Yen. Beside him, Ma Shichen can't help but cover her face. Just how much does this person want to be abused? She actually bolted directly towards Crown Prince Mo with her doors wide open like this. Needless to say, Crown Prince Mo probably had several hundred ways to subdue this guy in one move. However, Prince Mo chooses the most humiliating method. He directly kicks Mo Kuen's refined and handsome face, sending him flying backward and falling to the ground with a thud. Ah! Mo Kuen simply doesn't know what he just experienced. His handsome and confident image, his face, has all been tossed into the sea of forgetfulness at this moment. His anger completely erupts in a split second. He suddenly waves his hand and roars, "Berserk Bear!" A giant bear with brown, glossy fur abruptly burrowed out of his spirit beast space, glaring at Crown Prince Mo like a tiger eyeing its prey as it roared. Bang bang bang! That huge bear takes large strides and rushes towards Prince Mo. Arbor suddenly roars in anger, blazing blood. Shriek! The blazing blood fire phoenix suddenly appears. Without any explanation, a line of fire burns towards the huge bear's body. They actually dared to bully her lotus with numbers, they're simply tired of living. Arbor lightly flings his hand, and the little white snake on his wrist starts to swim. Its body gradually lengthens, and it suddenly opens its huge mouth, revealing its sharp fangs. That huge snake's head is already in front of Prince Giant Pain, and its huge mouth is aimed at his small and handsome face. It's as if it only needs to swallow him whole into its stomach. A certain prince is so frightened that his legs go soft, and he sits on the ground with a thud. His eyes are filled with fear as he stares deeply at the white snake in front of him. He swallows a mouthful of saliva, and for a long time, he's practically in a daze, unable to recover his soul. Stop, stop, quickly stop. Prefecture Lord Gung Pengcheng is also about to be scared silly by the scene in front of him. If anything happens to Prince Giant Pain here, then his position as Prefecture Lord will come to an end. Prince Giant Pain only needs to casually assemble a group of people, and they can easily destroy him, the Prefecture Lord, 3 to 5 times. So. Prince Giant Pain absolutely cannot have anything happen to him in Shantian Prefecture. Even more so, he can't die in Arbor's hands. Stop! Gung Pengcheng jumped up and quickly walked down the steps. He was just about to flick his sleeve across Xiao Mu's palm. A terrifying force flew towards him, blocking all the spiritual energy he had used. Bang! The little white snake shakes its head and hits, instantly sending Prince Giant Pain, who's almost pissing his pants, flying. Arbor leaps into the air and flies in front of Prince Giant Pain. He glances at him coldly, then reaches out and takes back the little white snake. Prince Mo has also floated to Arbor's side at this time. Relative? Arbor turns to look at the Crown Prince to confirm. It's fine. Seeing that he's asking for a beating, I'll beat him up even if he's a relative. Prince Mo raises his hand and waves. Blazing blood. Wait, wait. Seeing that the damned fire phoenix is about to pounce down again, Prince Giant Pain, who's terrified, can't help but cry out, I'm not feeling well, so I'll catch up on 2 more chapters before 11 a.m. tomorrow morning. Chapter 2072. Wait a minute. Who's waiting for you? The blazing blood fire phoenix swooped down and flapped its wings viciously, causing the Crown Prince of Giant Pain to stumble twice on the spot. He rolled to the edge of the table, and his big head knocked onto the green brick floor, breaking it instantly. Crown Prince! Crown Prince! Everyone cried out in alarm and stood up in unison. At this moment, the Crown Prince of Giant Pain was already in a very sorry state. He had probably never experienced such an embarrassing situation in his entire life. At the same time that he was panting heavily, his originally delicate and pretty face was also incomparably distorted. You! How dare you! Smack! The blazing blood fire phoenix's claw landed heavily on the crown prince of Giant Pain's head. Before he could finish shouting, this brat was once again thrown out by the ancient phoenix. This time, he crashed straight onto the female guest's table, causing a series of hurried and panicked screams. Plop! Plop! The crown prince of Giant Pain rolled down from the table in front of the two pale-faced women. He lay on the ground, gasping for air more than he exhaled. His throat made a loud sound, and he directly fainted from anger. Arbor swept a glance over the messy banquet in front of him, and paid special attention to Gung Pengcheng's greenish-black face. Her little hand gently tugged at Mo Lien's sleeve, and the little fellow blinked and asked, "Husband, are they crazy?" "It's obvious." Mo Lien pulled her little hand and turned to leave. Since so many unpleasant things had happened, what was the point of staying here? Wait. Seeing that they were about to leave, Gung Pengcheng immediately thought of something, and hurriedly turned around and walked forward. He originally wanted to block their way, but when he thought of the heavy power of the young man's sleeve that had almost slapped him away, he thought of the young man in black clothes who had just swept his sleeve. His eyelids involuntarily twitched, and he hurriedly took 2 steps back, standing 10 steps away from the two of them. He smiled apologetically and cupped his hands, saying, "The two of you, just now was just a small misunderstanding. The Crown Prince of Giant Pain is an honored guest from the Divine Prefecture, and you are also guests invited by this old man. I hope that both sides can get along harmoniously." He Shichen couldn't help but chuckle. Get along harmoniously? How can we get along harmoniously when we've already fought to this extent? Manor head. A calm voice came from behind them. Mo Lien and Arbor looked up and saw a woman in a pink-green satin gown and a pair of gold-plated tasseled hairpins walking towards them. Beneath her lustrous white skin were rosy cheeks, willowy eyebrows, and vermilion lips. She was a natural beauty. Unfortunately, compared to the little stoic's expressionless face that was as clear as the cold moon, this graceful and beautiful appearance was forcefully suppressed by several levels. This stoic face didn't need any expression. As long as he stood there, he could make all the women in the world pale in comparison. "Ah, it's third Miss Mu." Gung Pengcheng turned around and politely cupped his hands towards the girl. He laughed and said, "Third Miss, don't worry. It's nothing serious. These are all little friends that I invited." Mu Ro slightly furrowed her brows and swept her gaze across Arbor. Her gaze seemed to pause on Prince Mo for a moment. "Mister, I seem to have met you before." Gung Pengcheng was taken aback, and he deliberately sized up Mo Lien. He had always wanted to clearly investigate the identities and backgrounds of these people beside Arbor. However, it was very strange. It seemed like every time he investigated a crucial point, some information would always be erased. However, from the looks of it now, this man beside Arbor, whether it was his cultivation or identity, didn't seem to be that simple. Chapter 2073. Mo Lien's eyes were tranquil and unperturbed, so don't even think about reading anything from his expression. Dao Wuji by the side cannot help but laugh. "Miss, your way of striking up a conversation is not very reliable." Mu Ro Ku's face turns slightly red as she mumbles, not at all. She is indeed not striking up a conversation, as if she has really seen this man somewhere before. She dares to swear that she has definitely seen this man's exquisite and unadorned face before. But where did she see it before? For a moment, she actually cannot remember. Air. The screams of a few attendants allow Mu Ro Ku to regain her senses. She gracefully bows towards Gung Pengcheng. "I am going over to see how Air is doing." Okay. Gung Pengcheng is also somewhat helpless at this moment. He had seen Arbor and the others clearly. If there is any serious injury, then there is definitely no such injury. It's just that this face can be thrown all the way to the sea of forgetfulness. Jian Pain was obviously angered to the point of fainting because of his ugliness. Gung Pengcheng, what do you want? Speak. After experiencing such a farce, Arbor is too lazy to continue feigning civility with this person in front of her and directly asks. This miss, could it be that you have some misunderstanding towards me? Mannerhead Gung's eyes flash as he says with a smile, today, I invited your top academy here because I indeed have a small matter to discuss with you. This Mannerhead hopes to hire your academy's teachers and students to work for our Shantian prefecture. As for the price, it is easy to discuss. Arbor's face is cold as she raises her hand to stop him. Gung Pengcheng, can you stop pretending? I don't believe that you don't know who I am. Get straight to the point, what is your motive for calling me here today? Mannerhead Gung's eyelids keep twitching as he thinks, if it wasn't for the fact that you have so many experts by your side, I would have already killed you right here. This damned little monster, in a moment of carelessness and inattentiveness, I actually allowed her to grow to such an extent. Mu Rook stretched out her hand and gently pressed on the Crown Prince of Jian Pain's chest. She helped the Crown Prince of Jian Pain, who had let out a long sigh of relief, sit up. Is the Crown Prince all right? The Crown Prince of Jian Pain stared blankly for a moment before he suddenly thought of something. His entire face turned gloomy. Where are they? Are you all dead? Mo Kuan shouted angrily. Can't you take him down for me? Everyone looked at each other in dismay. Their hearts were in turmoil. Just now, that stoic-faced little girl summoned an ancient fire phoenix and a white snake with a wave of her hand. Even the air wasn't a match for the little girl and her group. What could these small fries do if they were to rush up? In the end, he still ended up being beaten up. Mo Kuan did not care what these people were thinking. He kicked the butt of one of his confidants. Go. If you can't hold it, then chop it off for me. I'll take responsibility if he dies. Wait. An idea flashed through Mu Roku's mind. She suddenly jumped up and stood in front of the numerous attendants, shouting loudly, No, you can't do it. Damn it, she remembered now. She had seen this handsome man somewhere before. In the palace, in the palace. That day, when the emperor was choosing a consort for the crown prince, she had walked past a pavilion and caught a glimpse of the crown prince's portrait. Tall and slender, elegant and natural. It was as if the myriad of words in the world were unable to describe the man in the portrait. The divine province's crown prince, Mo Lien. Chapter 2074. Mu Roku, what are you doing? The Crown Prince of Jian Pain glared at Mu Roku, his eyes almost reflecting substantial killing intent. This woman actually dared to disobey him in front of everyone. He was the Crown Prince of Jian Pain, someone with such a noble status. How could a mere daughter of an aristocratic family like her casually disobey him? Truly a bastard. The Crown Prince of Jian Pain glared coldly at Mu Roku, you better give me a reasonable reason. Otherwise. Mu Roku quickly walked forward and hurriedly came to the Crown Prince of Jian Pain's side, whispering into his ear. Mo Kuan's expression changed slightly. He raised his head to look at Arbor and Mo Lien, then turned to look at Mu Roku and asked in a low voice, Is this true? The Crown Prince of Jian Pain had always been an ignorant and incompetent hedonistic son. He had been used to eating, drinking, and playing since young and had never cared about the country's political affairs. He also knew very little about the divine province's crown prince whom he had never met before. He wasn't a shrewd person, and his face reflected all his emotions clearly. Mu Roku's words indeed made him feel very surprised. However, absolutely true. Mu Roku nodded and said, Kuer's words are all true. There is absolutely no falsehood. Kuer saw this with her own eyes. Crown Prince, if you become enemies with His Highness, how will you deal with yourself when you return to the divine province? The Crown Prince of Giant Pain pondered for a moment and coldly glanced at Mo Yen. His Highness? Whether he could return to the Divine Province alive, and whether he could secure the position of Crown Prince after returning to the Divine Province, was still unknown. Who didn't know that the Divine Province's Crown Prince had been wandering outside for many years and knew very little about the current political situation and regime of the Divine Province? If he returned, would he be able to grasp the lifeline and power of the Divine Province? Would he truly be able to sit on the Divine Province's Crown Prince position? Who knew? He dared to be so arrogant and despotic before even going to the Divine Province. If he really allowed this person to secure the position of Crown Prince, would he, Mo Kun, have a good life? The Crown Prince of Giant Pain's eyes flickered and coldly said to Ro Ku, don't spout nonsense. How could my cousin, the Crown Prince, appear in such a damned place? Seeing that Ro still wanted to say something, the Crown Prince of Giant Pain raised his hand to stop her. This Crown Prince only knows that the Crown Prince of the Divine Province has been wandering outside for many years. Whether or not he is the Crown Prince has yet to be verified. Alright, you don't have to say any more. I know my limits. These people had beaten him up so arrogantly, and they still wanted him to acknowledge their identities? Humph. It was simply a pipe dream. The Crown Prince of Giant Pain's face turned gloomy, and he suddenly raised his hand. What are you still standing there for? You. Shio. A flurry of arrows suddenly shot into the courtyard from outside. The arrowheads were aimed straight at the Shuntian Prefecture's prefecture lord and his wife. Madame Geng and Madame Feng stood up at the same time. Madame Geng and Madame Feng put their hands on the short table and leaped up horizontally. With a flick of their sleeves, they swept away 17 to 18 iron arrows. The hall was startled. Clang! 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 Several dozen arrows fell to the ground. The rest of the people's expressions changed slightly as they blocked the iron arrows flying in front of them. Some of the cannon fodder bodyguards standing at the door unfortunately became the first wave of people to die an unnatural death in this round of attack. Arbor had already been caught by Prince Mo when he turned around. With a gentle sweep of his palm, the arrowheads that were flying towards them suddenly stopped in midair. They persisted in mid-air for less than a second before falling to the ground with a bang. They quickly turned into a pile of powder and dissipated. Chapter 2075. This sudden assassination was aimed at Manor Lord Geng and his wife, so Arbor and the others had nothing to do with it. They coldly watched as Geng Pengcheng and his wife engaged in a life-and-death struggle with a large group of assassins who had jumped down from the high walls. Arbor and the others simply stopped and leisurely walked to the side to watch. In any case, the assassins were the Manor Lord and his wife, so it had nothing to do with them. There was no need for them to intervene in an inexplicable assassination. Manor Lord Geng and his wife, Madame Feng, fought as they retreated. Soon, they were surrounded by the group of assassins. Arbor only felt that everything in front of her was quite dramatic. The fact that the assassins who had jumped down from the walls were able to enter the main manor of Shuntian Prefecture so smoothly showed that the defenses of Shuntian Prefecture were not worth mentioning. Could it be that Geng Pengcheng and the Palace Lord of the Palace of Cold Blood were this weak? Under the assassination of a group of inexplicable assassins, they could not resist at all. Was the acting real or fake? Arbor pursed her lips and exchanged a look of understanding with Mo Yen, who was looking down at her. After silently preparing for battle, Xiao Mu summoned the ferrule from her conscience into her hand. As expected, Manor Lord Geng shouted, and many Shuntian Prefecture guards suddenly appeared from outside the main hall. They caught the group of assassins and the two sides began to fight. Suddenly, the sound of something breaking through the air could be heard. Mo Yen did not even raise her head. She quickly reached out to pick up Arbor and jumped onto 7th Yan's back. The golden dragon transformed into its beast form in midair. With a slight twist, its dragon tail landed on the eaves with a bang, shattering a large piece of debris and scattering it down. In an instant, Gung Pengcheng's expression changed greatly. He really did not expect that the couple would have ancient sacred beasts, a dragon and a phoenix, by their side. No wonder all the people he had sent out were like stones sinking into the ocean. They had probably been secretly taken care of. It turned out that the beasts by their side were so powerful. Gung Pengcheng muttered to himself for a moment and secretly gave a look to one of the guard leaders. The latter understood and shouted, "The main manor has been attacked with malicious intent. Everyone present cannot leave for the time being. Until everything is investigated, we can." Whoosh! A crossbow arrow fell from the sky and pierced through that person's chest. The guard leader was stunned for a moment. He lowered his head to look at his chest, then looked up in astonishment at the girl holding the crossbow on the dragon's back. Heavens, wasn't he not finished talking? The head of the guards died with a grudge. Even when he died, he didn't understand what had happened. Whoosh, whoosh whoosh. Xiaomu didn't say a word, and her crow-repeating crossbow continuously shot out several arrows at a group of people wearing Shantian Prefecture's guard uniform. When little Taisui and the others saw her make a move, they also followed suit and killed the Shantian Hall's imperial bodyguards who had blindly surrounded them. For a moment, the scene was inexplicably chaotic. Gung Pengcheng, the Shantian Prefecture's manor lord, was even more stunned. Then, he shouted angrily, "What are you two doing? This old man kindly invited people from your top academy to attend a banquet. Is this how you repay me? Indiscriminately starting to kill Shantian Palace's imperial guards, what exactly do you people want to do?" Gung Pengcheng, the Shantian Prefecture's manor lord, glared at Arbor's group with fury in his eyes. Arbor's lips curled into a cold smile. "Gung Pengcheng, are you retarded?" Chapter 2076. Everyone was speechless as they turned to look at the stoic-faced little girl. They didn't know why, but when they saw the little stoic standing on the dragon's back and looking down on everyone from high above, they inexplicably felt a bit amused. "Do you think everyone else is as stupid as you? These two groups of people are all your people," Arbor said coldly as he gazed at the assassins brandishing their machetes. "They're even using the same model of machete. Can you be more careful when you're arranging the act? Don't you think there's something wrong with your IQ when you're seen through with a single glance?" When everyone heard Arbor's words, they couldn't help but glance back. Sure enough, they were rendered speechless when they discovered that the group of assassins, who had previously shot arrows at them and jumped down the wall to surround them, were truly the same model as the machetes in the hands of the city lord's estate's royal guards. Gung Pengcheng couldn't help but twitch his eyebrows, and he glared hatefully at Arbor. "Cunning and argumentative. You don't need to say more. You must have brought these assassins over, right? You're still slandering this prefecture lord now. Don't think you can pin the blame on this prefecture lord." Shantian Prefecture's prefecture lord Gung Pengcheng reprimanded angrily. "Men, seize them for me first." In a split second, a large number of royal guards surged out from the four corners of the courtyard. They held a type of long cylindrical weapon in their hands and abruptly fired it into the sky. A fine net shot out from each cylindrical tube. What was shocking was that after these hundreds to thousands of fine nets fell into the air, they actually connected seamlessly and ultimately formed a giant net that blotted out the sky and covered the earth, leaving no room for escape. "Heh heh." Arbor sneered, "So they were waiting for her here." It looked like Prefecture Lord Gung had probably simulated today's capture scene with his lackeys many times. Otherwise, how could they cooperate so well? The first step was to hypocritically invite her to the estate for a gathering. The second step was to write, direct, and act out the scene of the assassins attacking and the royal guards retaliating. The third step was the current highlight, directly shedding all pretense of cordiality and capturing her. TSK. Did she think that these broken nets made of special materials would be able to trap her? Clang. An arrow from Arbor fell into the net and almost bounced back. Looking at the large gray net that connected together above their heads, Xiao Mu quickly shrunk back into Mo Lian's arms and complained in a huff, "Hubby, this stinky net bounced my crow-gold arrow back. This was really hard." Hearing this, Mo Lian immediately extended 2 clusters of dark sacred fire from her fingertips. "Just burn it." When the 2 wisps of faintly discernible black flames landed on the huge net above him, the complacent Gung Pengcheng didn't even have the time to appreciate the inescapable net he had set up before he saw clusters of black flames engulfing him. The sturdy net that had bounced the black gold arrows back quickly melted into droplets of liquid under the scorching heat of the black flames. Prince Mo's eyes lit up, and he immediately took out a porcelain bottle to collect the liquid. "If you use this quenched liquid together with the Arctic star sand, your pharaoh will definitely be forged into a divine tool." After saying this, Crown Prince Mo creased his brows in distress. "It's just that my bronze furnace is a bit too shabby and can't support the forging of a divine weapon. It might explode halfway through the forging process." The little fellow hurriedly asked, "Do you have any good forging furnaces?" "If you want a good forging furnace, the Forgetting River furnace is the best." Wait. Chapter 2077. It's a pity that it's said to be buried in the secret realm of the Sea of Forgetfulness. How many people have entered the secret realm of the Sea of Forgetfulness and returned empty-handed? Mo Lian sighs with emotion, then says, "The second-ranked refining furnace, the heavenly forging furnace, is now in the hands of an extremely famous divine weapon master in Divine Prefecture. Presumably, he's also unwilling to give it up." Arbor blinks. "Who is that person?" "It's said that he's a descendant of Xuanji." Mo Lian shakes her head. "Very few people have seen him. He's a guy who appears and disappears unpredictably. Usually, he lives under the snowy mountains near the Sea of Forgetfulness, and his whereabouts are hard to find." "Oh." Arbor calculates in her heart, then can't she drag him out and beat him until he gives up on the heavenly forging furnace? After all, even Mo Lian says that person's whereabouts are a mystery. It seems that finding him will be a difficult matter. Then we can only look for him again. Is there no divine weapon similar to the heavenly forging furnace? There is, but I reckon that we'll have to go to Divine Prefecture's Ghost City to take a look. Mo Lian winks at her. "Wife, after we go back together, you have to accompany me to buy it. The things in the Ghost City are expensive. Sometimes, even a small forging material can be sold for a sky-high price." "No problem." Arbor nods her head, with an "I'll pay" look. She raises her little paw and pats Mo Lian's chest. "When the time comes, I'll definitely buy you the best forging furnace." Mo Lian reaches out to hug the little guy, rubbing her face. "Jojo is so good." And Gung Pengcheng, who's glaring at them from below, is probably already bursting with anger. How can there be such a shameless person in this world? Not only does he use a strange kind of fire to roast her giant net, but he also collects all the liquid after the roasting, and steals it as his own. Such a bad habit is not worth mentioning. The most shameful thing is that in this tense fighting situation, this adulterous couple actually has the face to chat and laugh with him above. Disgusting. Simply shameful. Gung Pengcheng roared, "Release the arrows." This time, they didn't conceal themselves anymore. The row of black-clothed assassins from before all flashed the bows and arrows at their waists. With a flurry of arrows, they shot towards Xiao Mu and company like a rain of arrows. This batch of arrows contained extremely powerful spiritual energy. When they were fired, little Tai Sui, the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal, and the others could sense it. However, these arrowheads, which were full of spiritual power, were like children's toys in front of them. They were caught in their hands, and with a light twist, they fell to the ground. Damn it! Gung Pengcheng's eyes were green with anger. Set up the formation. After a furious roar, the large number of assassins and guards on the field mixed together and slowly set up a large formation. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal, Little Ticeway, and the others had already leaped into the air. They stepped on the backs of everyone's heads and leaped into the air. "TSK, I'm not going to play with you anymore." Yuan Shichen looked at the people below with a smile. With a flick of his sleeve, it was as if peach blossoms filled the world. Everyone seemed to be in a sea of pink flowers, and their eyes were filled with slowly falling peach blossom petals. This scene was so beautiful that it mesmerized their hearts. For a moment, even the palace master of the Palace of Cold Blood, Madame Feng, was stunned. She stopped and stared blankly at the scene of dancing petals filling the sky. Until, a blood-curdling scream came from someone's throat, which was bubbling with blood. Madame Feng was shocked and immediately recovered. She hurriedly activated her defensive barrier and cried out, "Be careful." Chapter 2078. How was this a beautiful peach blossom rain? It was clearly a peach blossom massacre that took people's lives. The stench of death permeated the air, causing everyone to feel suffocated in an instant. These peach blossom petals were like sharp weapons, falling piece by piece, cutting open everyone's bodies. Once the peach blossom petals brushed past their necks, it was only death. Several people fell beside them. Crown Prince Jian Pain, Mo Kuan, who had activated all the defensive devices on his fingers, wished he could dig a hole and bury himself immediately, saving himself from coming into contact with the peach blossom of death. At this very moment, an incomparably cold aura approached. Crown Prince Jian Pain felt from the bottom of his heart that this was the aura of death. This strange thought in his mind caused Crown Prince Jian Pain to tremble uncontrollably. His pleading gaze swept towards Gung Pengcheng and his wife, but the latter did not even look at him. On the contrary, Mu family's third miss, Mu Ro Ku, who had been standing beside him, appeared much calmer. She only activated her defensive barrier and quietly stood beside him. She did not make a fuss or scream in pain like Crown Prince Jian Pain. In Mu Ro Ku's opinion, screaming at this moment was completely meaningless. Screaming could only show one's fear and terror. Would it make the enemy give up on killing them? It was obviously impossible. Therefore, it did not matter if she screamed or not. Mu Ro Ku forcefully calmed herself down and reached out to tug at Crown Prince Jian Pain's sleeve. "Crown Prince, don't scream. You have 3 defensive barriers on your body. Pay attention to maintaining your own spiritual energy. Don't let it be depleted too quickly. Otherwise, the defensive barriers will not be able to hold on." Mu Ro Ku's reminder allowed Crown Prince Jian Pain, who was in a state of collapse, to clear his mind. Thinking that Mu Ro Ku's words were not wrong, he hurriedly nodded. His eyes were still trembling as he looked at the people in the peach blossom rain. There were already many people who had fallen to the ground, unable to get up. Some had their throats slit and died on the ground. There were even more who had their hands and feet cut by the peach blossom petals. At this moment, the front of the hall was filled with people rolling back and forth. At a glance, it was extremely unbearable. Gung Pengcheng used the tip of his foot to kick a guard who had fallen by his feet and angrily shouted, get up for me." However, that person's thigh had been cut by the peach blossom petals. At this moment, he was hugging his thigh and rolling back and forth, howling in pain. Naturally, he wouldn't listen to him and immediately get up. When Crown Prince Jian Pain saw that Gung Pengcheng was helpless against the situation before him, he couldn't help but panic. He hurriedly looked at Mu Ro Ku and said, "Ku'er, shouldn't we retreat first?" Mu Ro couldn't help but laugh bitterly. Retreat? Where could they retreat to? Ever since that man with an extremely high cultivation base had made his move, he had set up restrictions all around the central room, making it impossible for them to escape. The Crown Prince of Jian Pain's nagging sounded in her ears. I am the Crown Prince of Jian Pain. Since that person is my cousin, he shouldn't treat me like this, right? Cooper, do you think he'll let us go if we go and claim our kinship? Mu Ro couldn't help but smile bitterly again. Could it be that this young master didn't understand? If he really cared about that bit of kinship, would the crown prince have been so ruthless to him before? Stop, quickly stop. Crown Prince Giant Pain, who clearly didn't wait for her answer, took the initiative to act. Mu Ro couldn't stop him even if she wanted to. Crown Prince Giant Pain knelt on the ground with a plop. Chapter 2079. Very dramatically, that guy clasped his hands together and cried bitterly, Your Highness the Crown Prince, I am Mo Kuan. The King of Giant Pain's son, Mo Kuan, your younger cousin. That shameless look of finding his biological brother from 800 years ago was almost breathtaking. Damn it, you only just found out that Mo Lien is your brother. Where did that ferocious look and arrogance go? Wasn't it because you were scared out of your wits by the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal? Arbor lowered his head to look at the King of Giant Pain's heir, who was kneeling on the ground and cupping his hands toward the sky. He frowned and said with disdain, How can you have such a brother? It was simply too embarrassing. Mo Lien also felt ashamed, especially when he saw his little wife's disdainful gaze. He felt even more stifled. The fury in his gaze that was fixed on Mo Kuan's sword. The wind from his palm landed, directly lifting Mo Kuan onto his back. Don't call me brother. Who's your older cousin? Scram. Mo Kuan was stunned, and a trace of embarrassment flashed across his face. He hurriedly got up and crawled forward on all fours, crying bitterly, Older cousin, I am Mo Kuan, the King of Giant Pain's son, Mo Kuan. Woo, my father is your imperial father's youngest brother. Older cousin. You can't kill me, you can't kill me. He was almost scared to death now. That madman who scattered peach blossoms had set up a peach blossom rain and easily took away the lives of dozens of guards. He didn't want to die like them without knowing why. He wanted to live. No matter what, he couldn't be killed by a few small peach blossom petals. So cowardly. Arbor swept a disdainful glance at Mo Lien. His meaning couldn't be clearer, you actually have such a cowardly brother. Is everyone in your Mo family a coward except you? I don't want to bother with you anymore. Embarrassing. Not to mention that this person had several defensive shields on him, those falling peach blossom petals didn't even penetrate his defenses. Even if he had lost all his spiritual energy and defensive shields, he shouldn't be begging for mercy in such a cowardly manner. As the saying goes, a warrior prefers death to humiliation. What Crown Prince of Giant Pain? He was simply a big coward. Mo Lien couldn't help but fly into a rage, and he directly slapped the vassal Prince of Giant Pain across the air. Scram! Unexpectedly, when the Crown Prince of Giant Pain heard this, not only did he not get angry, he even shed tears of gratitude. He repeatedly bowed with both hands and said, Okay, I'll scram immediately. Cousin, don't worry, I won't appear in front of you for no reason. Everyone was dumbfounded as they watched the man turn his head and roll on the ground twice before he scrambled to his feet and ran out in a panic. They looked away in an instant, and everyone looked at Prince Mo with strange gazes. Senior Celestial, look at how scared you are. Dao Wuji laughed awkwardly and couldn't help but tease. He Chen was baffled. Was this Crown Prince of Giant Pain out of his mind? Did he think that those falling peach blossom petals would randomly attack people? Every single petal was under his control, okay. Otherwise, why didn't the peach blossom petals attack his, Crown Prince of Giant Pain's, defensive shield when they fell? Did he think that with just his level 3 spirit artifact defensive shield, he could withstand a Senior Celestial's killing move? For Prince Mo's sake, she wouldn't kill him, okay? Darling Qiao pulled husband Mo's hand away and threw his hand to the side, facing him with the back of her head. Chapter 2080. Mo Lien hurriedly reaches out to hug her, once again bringing her to his side. He comforts her, "Don't worry, I don't have such a cowardly brother. When we get back, immediately remove his name from the genealogy." Prince Mo lowers his voice by her ear, "I definitely won't let my Jojo lose face." Arbor snorts, "Your relatives in Shenzhou, don't tell me they're all like this." Mo Lien, "What's with this indescribable stifled feeling? His little wifey always dislikes him." No, they won't." Mo Lien braces herself to say. "In fact, there really are quite a few troublesome characters among those relatives in Shenzhou." Mo Lien hurriedly grasps his wifey's small hand, "Let's ignore them, let's go. Jojo, let's talk about Shenzhou's ghost city." Forcefully changing the topic. On the side, the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal sweeps a rather disdainful glance at Mo Lien. Mo Lien naturally notices the look in Xingjiaqin's eyes. Taking advantage of when Jojo isn't paying attention, she also throws him a cold glance. The group descends from midair. After half a day's effort, the giant net above their heads has long dissipated, and Mo Lien's porcelain bottle has accumulated more than half of the solution. After putting away the porcelain bottle, Mo Lien takes Arbor's small hand and walks out. The sound of a sharp arrow piercing through the air comes from behind the two people's heads. Mo Lien doesn't even turn her head, directly reaching out with her hand and throwing out a purple flame. Like a tiny purple dragon, the flame whooshes through the air, crackling as it wraps around the arrow that's coming straight at them. In a flash, the arrow that's flying towards them is completely eliminated. It's impolite not to reciprocate. Arbor suddenly turns around, shooting 10 black gold arrows at the palace master of the Palace of Cold Blood. Fengshe probably didn't expect this little girl to move so quickly. In a single turn, 10 black gold arrows are fired at the same time. She dodged 6 or 7 of them, but in the end, she couldn't dodge the remaining 2 or 3. Of the 3 black gold arrows, one shot off a lock of her long hair, the second shot into her shoulder, and the third shot into her hand. Their power spread outwards from within her body, penetrating her bone marrow. With 2 whooshing sounds, the arrows shot out of her body. That heart-wrenching pain made Madame Feng scream involuntarily. "Master!" Fairy Ling Fei followed the sound and hurriedly rushed over to support the tottering Madame Feng. Fairy Yellow Crane also hurried forward. Just as she reached out to help Madame Feng, Fairy Ling Fei slapped her hand away. "Get lost! Don't touch Master," Fairy Ling Fei rebuked angrily. "Isn't that woman your benefactor?" "Friends? Did you see that? She was so ruthless to her master. If you are still Master's disciple, then pick up the sword on the ground and fight her with your life." Immortal Huang He's lips quivered as she gazed at Xiao Mu in bewilderment. "Little benefactor. You're still calling her benefactor?" Fairy Ling Fei rebuked angrily, kicking her back. "Are you an idiot? She's already made a move on Master. Senior sister, there. There must be some misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding my ass. You and I both saw with our own eyes that woman hurt Master to this extent." Arbor glanced coldly at Fairy Ling Fei. Seeing little Yellow Crane look over, he gave a rare explanation. "Your master shot us in the back. That arrow was imbued with divine power," Mo Lien said coldly. "If he hadn't been by his wife's side just now, she would have suffered greatly from the divine power on the arrow." Chapter 2081. Fairy Yellow He looked at Madame of Foam with a distressed expression and then looked up at Fairy Ling Fei. She hastily grabbed her sleeve and shouted, "Why? Why did Master shoot arrows in the back?" "Shut up!" Fairy Ling Fei angrily flung her hand away and reprimanded, "You believe what others say. Did you see Master shoot arrows in the back with your own eyes?" Fairy Yellow He drooped her head and reached out to help Madame of Foam up, but Fairy Ling Fei slapped her hand away. "How dare you be so arrogant in Shuntian Prefecture? What kind of background do you have?" Fairy Lingfei snorted angrily. Regardless of your background, anyone who dares to make a move in my Shuntian prefecture and injure our family's mistress will die. Shuntian prefecture's prefecture lord also had a gloomy expression as he stood behind them with his hands behind his back. The entire Shuntian mansion's main hall was now densely surrounded by layers upon layers of Shuntian mansion's guards. At a rough glance, Shuntian prefecture actually mobilized more than 1,000 people. Prefecture Lord, let's talk nicely. Third Miss Mu Ro pursed her lips and suddenly walked to the center of the main hall with a flick of her sleeves. She stood in front of Arbor's group and bowed to Gung Pengcheng. Prefecture Lord, you must have heard what Prince Jian Pain said just now. This is His Highness Mo Lian, the Crown Prince of Shenzhou. You can't do this. Quickly withdraw your troops. Don't let the misunderstanding continue to grow. Mu Ro gave Shuntian Prefecture's Prefecture Lord Gung Pengcheng a fierce look and transmitted her voice. If His Highness the Crown Prince is harmed in any way, you won't be able to bear the consequences of the Emperor's anger. Besides, it looks like you're no match for the Crown Prince's group at all. Why do you have to forcefully detain him and make both sides suffer instead? Just now, the Crown Prince of Jian Pain was making a ruckus so loud that everyone knew about it. The Shuntian Prefecture's Prefecture Lord, Gung Pengcheng, naturally saw that obsequious appearance of his. He already knew why it was so difficult to find information about the people around Arbor. It turned out that the black-robed young man was His Highness the Crown Prince of Shenzhou. And what he found was only the identity of Mo Kingdom's Crown Prince on Seacombe Planet. Gung Pengcheng naturally didn't care about the Crown Prince of a lower star region country. Of course, he was also puzzled as to why the Crown Prince's cultivation was so high. However, when he investigated further, he found nothing. Unexpectedly, this person was actually the Crown Prince of the Divine Land. Gung Pengcheng took a deep breath. He felt that he had to sort out his thoughts at this moment. Forget it. Since he was the Crown Prince of Shenzhou, it would be unrealistic for him to detain him by force, just as Third Young Lady Mu said. He would only be looking for trouble. Gung Pengcheng's old face was taut as he waved his hand to order the rows of Shuntian Hall guards in front of the lobby to retreat several tens of meters. Mo Lian, Arbor, Yuan Shichen, Little Taisui, and the others were all standing there, staring at the manor head with different expressions. Manor Lord. Fairy Lingfei couldn't help but call out, are you going to let it go just like that? What about Master's injuries? The palace master of the Palace of Cold Blood hadn't been unconscious for long. She had already woken up and was looking at her husband, Gung Pengcheng. Gung Pengcheng muttered to himself for a moment before saying, Lingfei, this matter is mostly a misunderstanding. It was chaos when we fought just now, and your master was injured for some reason. Fairy Lingfei clenched her fists tightly. She wanted to say something else, but Madame Feng pressed her hand down and restrained her anger. Chapter 2082. Let's drop this matter. Gung Pengcheng thought for a moment and waved his hand. Madame Feng coughed lightly and stopped talking. Arbor sized her up and didn't say anything. She just raised her hand and tugged at the Crown Prince's sleeve. Mo Lian looked down at her with a smile. Okay. Arbor nodded with satisfaction. Mo Lian looked up at Gung Pengcheng and said with a faint smile, Principal Gung, may I have a word with you? Gung Pengcheng was stunned. He wanted to refuse, but when he thought of her identity as the Crown Prince of Shenzhou, he felt that if he refused, she wouldn't let it go easily. So he walked over helplessly and followed the Crown Prince and Arbor into the inner room. What does your highness want to ask? Before Gung Pengcheng could finish his sentence, he was horrified to find a cluster of black fire floating in front of him. It was only for a moment, but it almost ignited his eyebrows and eyes. Gung Pengcheng was furious. He was about to explode when he realized that the world in front of him had changed. In an instant, he was in a completely different environment. The crown prince of Shenzhou in front of him was gone. Arbor stood in front of him with a transparent onion head baby standing on her shoulder. Beside his calf, there was a small, squarish lump of earth. It looked very strange, and on the lump of earth, there was a pair of black bean-like eyes. At this moment it was blinking and looking at him. Gung Pengcheng was a little surprised. He looked back and forth and was almost stunned by the expanse of peach trees in front of him. This is... Roar! A giant snow leopard suddenly jumped out from behind and pounced, almost crushing him to the ground. This. Gung Pengcheng had a very bad feeling in his heart at this moment. Could it be that this damned girl had a grotto heaven immortal abode and land of inheritance? Was that why she suddenly seemed to be out of their control all these years? Like a wild horse out of its reins, she galloped further and further away. He was also shocked by her silent growth. Could it be like this? Arbor. You have the secret of the grotto heaven immortal abode. If the world finds out. Arbor suddenly smiled at him. Her eyes, which were already clear and bright like the moon, now looked even colder. Do you think you can leave this place alive? Don't be too arrogant. Ah! Before Gung Pengcheng could finish his sentence, he felt a heavy slap on his back. His entire body flew forward uncontrollably, and fell to the ground with a bang. Just as he opened his mouth and was about to spit out a mouthful of blood, he was pulled into the air by Arbor's will. His entire body was wrapped in a mist. As for the blood he spat out, it dyed the mist barrier in front of him red. Arbor said with a look of disgust, "You almost dirted my paradise." Master Silver, don't worry. Jianjian won't let his stinky blood dirty our land." Only at this moment did Gung Pengcheng feel how small he was. It was as if in this place, all of his actions were restricted. Even his spiritual energy was restricted by a terrifying pressure. He didn't know that this was the pressure of the small tree and that the entire star field was formed by the small tree. In the star field, no one could touch Arbor. In this star field, Arbor was a godlike existence. Gung Pengcheng only thought that all of this was Arbor's doing. At this moment, he felt an inexplicable sense of danger and couldn't help but tremble slightly. "Manor Lord Gung, you should feel honored. After all, as an enemy, you are the first person to enter my star field." Chapter 2083. Ordinary enemies can be dealt with outside. As for you, you are naturally different from them, Xiao Mu stated dryly. "In my eyes, you are a very special enemy." Gung Pengcheng inexplicably shuddered. He was wrapped in a cloud of water mist, and no matter how he struggled, he couldn't break free. He floated in the air, looking down at Arbor with some surprise, and cried out involuntarily, "Arbor, what did you do?" Under Arbor's signal, Jianjian waved its transparent little arm and pulled him down from the air. He was still wrapped in a thin transparent water membrane, but the water membrane in front of him was clearly dyed red by the blood that Gung Pengcheng spat out. "Are you an idiot? How dare you speak such nonsense in Master Silver's place, and speak disrespectfully to Master Silver?" The little water child waved its chubby little hand and snorted, "Answer my Master Silver's question properly, or I'll kill you right now." "Joe, Arbor." "Paw." The snow leopard stretched out a paw and slapped the water ball heavily. So everyone only saw Gung Pengcheng, who was wrapped in the water membrane, fiercely bounce on the ground, and jump high up. Gung Pengcheng only felt that under this slap, his internal organs turned upside down, and he was in indescribable pain. Ugh! He had a feeling of wanting to vomit. Arbor immediately turned its big eyes away in disgust. But in a flash, Hu Shiqin's figure appeared next to her. Curling the corner of her mouth, Hu Shiqin looked meaningfully at Gung Pengcheng in the water membrane, stretched out a slender finger, and pointed at Arbor's forehead, "You're really bold, to actually let him in like this." Arbor clenched his hands and forcefully tightened them. There shouldn't be anyone here who can see through Lotus's defensive barrier. Indeed, there isn't. Hu Shichen nodded and looked at her with a deep gaze, but everything is about what if. If word of this star field of yours gets out, and evil people find out. He Chen sighed. I'm worried about you. Arbor walked up to him and tugged at his sleeve. I know. She was indeed a little impatient today. This Gung Pengcheng in front of her was the one who had caused her to fall into the abyss in her previous life. In this life, he had repeatedly sent people to kill her. When she saw this person, she felt her blood boil. She simply couldn't endure it. Death? Did he think that death was his final destination? What a joke. The person who had caused her to suffer so miserably in both her previous and current lives was now in her hands. How could she just let him walk comfortably to his death? I'll take out his soul remembrance, and you put Dun Ji's soul into this body. From now on, the Shuntian Prefecture's prefecture lord is yours. He Chen looked at her with a smile and said. When Arbor heard this, his eyes seemed to light up, and his spirit was lifted. Stop at a stalk. That chatterbox? Last time, she had conveniently thrown him into a corner of Taoyuan and made him face the wall to reflect on his past. With a flip of her hand, Arbor took the little Taisui into her dungeon and used her mind to absorb it into her hand. At this moment, the transparent little person in the dungeon looked at her with teary eyes and cried out bitterly, Ah, my honorable little Master Silver, have you finally remembered the Dun Tun Tun in the corner of the peach garden? Don't be long-winded. Arbor glared at him and turned to look at Hu Shichen with the little dungeon in her hand. Chapter 2084. Ji Chen, you goddamn bastard. I was banished to a corner by little Master, and you don't even know how to visit me. You don't even know how to put in a good word for me. Back then, why did I fall in love with such a heartless and unscrupulous thing like you, ah? Ji Chen looks at the figure in the dungeon with a strange expression. Why do I feel that Dunzin's words are a bit harsh to the ear? What's going on? Arbor punches that dungeon with his little hand. Shut up. Woo woo. Dunzin sobs pitifully. Peach Blossom Immortal wants to change a new body for you. If you keep crying, woo, I won't change it. Dunzin instantly stops talking, his dog eyes widen as he looks at Arbor and repeatedly asks, Little Master, what kind of body will you change for me? Is it beautiful? Is it elegant? Is my skin bright and clean? Arbor looks at him speechlessly. It's right behind you, see for yourself. Dunzin suddenly turns his head, his gaze blankly landing on Gung Pengcheng, who is enveloped by the water membrane. He immediately lets out a miserable cry. Ah! He's a baldy. How is he a baldy? Ji Chen snappily picks up the small dungeon in Arbor's hand. Change if you want. If you pass this village, there won't be another shop. Dunzin's tears fall. Little Master, can't you change me into a prettier body? For example, someone like the Crown Prince, who looks as gentle as jade, or someone like Ji Chen, who is ravishingly charming will do too. You're the one who's beautiful and charming. Ma Shichen punched the dungeon. Shut up. Woo. Then do you want to change? Yes. Having a body is better than floating without one. Dunzin has no other choice now, so he reluctantly nods and agrees. How depressing, this prefecture lord looks like he's over 50 years old. He doesn't look good at all, and his sideburns are also bald. At first glance, he looks like a hairless vulture. Woo. In the future, he will have to carry this image in the pugilistic world for a long time. How depressing, how to deal with it? Yuan Shichen was too lazy to pay attention to this ADHD-like transparent little person, and directly threw the dungeon into the air. He grabbed Gung Pengcheng's body with one hand and pressed his other hand on Gung Pengcheng's head. Gung Pengcheng's entire body was trembling. At first, he could still call out, "What are you doing?" Gradually, it turned into, "Ah, Your Honor, please spare my life." However, as the pressure gradually increased, Gung Pengcheng could no longer continue speaking. His entire body felt dizzy. When he opened his eyes again, he was horrified to find that his body was standing right in front of him. Lowering his head to take another look, his body had actually become transparent and illusory. This. Had his soul been seized? Oh! How could this be? Who was this person? Hu Shichen merely glanced at him indifferently. With a flick of his sleeve, Gung Pengcheng's soul remembrance was sucked in by a heavy suction force and instantly fell into Hu Shichen's hand. Ah! No, don't kill me, don't kill me. Arbor stood beside Hu Shichen and coldly looked at the disheveled Gung Pengcheng. A faint light flashed through his eyes. The current situation was absolutely gratifying to everyone. However, she didn't feel much joy. It was as if the past was like floating clouds, and her mental state had inexplicably improved slightly. The three people's figures returned to the inner hall. Mo Lien heard the sound, slowly turned around, and smiled at her. Chapter 2085. This is Dun Zhu's new body. Mo Lien's long brows raised slightly as she looked at the person shyly cowering behind He Shichen. Arbor shouted at him exasperatedly, "Hurry up and come over." Dun Zhu hurriedly jumped in front of her, pulling a long face as he asked pitifully, "Master, if there's a chance next time, can you give me a handsome body again? Such high standards. And handsome too." Where was she going to find a handsome man for him? Scram. Dun Zhu sobbed, "He Shichen, are you deliberately harming me? Look at Master, she doesn't like this body so much. You deliberately let me enter the body of Master's enemy so that Master doesn't like me." He Shichen's brows twitched. "You're thinking too much." He knew that Jojo was going to settle accounts with Shantian Prefecture. Right now, he was letting Dun Zhu enter Shantian Prefecture as a spy. When the time came, they could work together to eliminate all the enemies in Shantian Prefecture in one fell swoop. Woo-woo. Keep crying and I'll kill you. He Shichen couldn't bear it any longer and glared at him. Mo Lien only found it a little funny. She grasped Arbor's hand and pulled her to her side, asking, "Jojo, did it go well?" Arbor nodded and glanced at the dungeon in He Shichen's hand. The dungeon that originally held Dun Zhu was now Shantian Prefecture's Prefecture Lord Gung Pengcheng's turn to stay inside. Master, this dungeon was made by Little Taisui. It's very sinister. Day after day, they would attack the divine consciousness inside. Oh, of course, this old man is only a spiritual consciousness body now. He's not qualified to form divine sense yet. He can't even withstand a single attack. He's going to turn into ashes soon. Ah. No, don't. Shantian Prefecture's Prefecture Lord Gung Pengcheng was immediately scared out of his wits. He repeatedly waved his hands and shouted, "Crown Princess, ask whatever you want. I will definitely tell you everything I know. I don't know if there's anything strange about this human soul body. It would be best not to leave him in Taoyuan. This is to prevent others from remotely obtaining information through his soul remembrance." He Chen glanced at Gung Pengcheng. Arbor's heart skipped a beat. "You can do this?" Mo Lien nodded. "Yes, it's best to be careful. Normally, you can just throw him into the storage talisman, and it won't be a problem." "All right." Xiao Mu grabbed this earthen prison and shook it vigorously. "I'll give you time to think it over properly. At this time tomorrow, I want you to clearly explain everything to me from beginning to end. You know the consequences of lying to me." After saying that, he threw the earth prison into the storage talisman. The earth prison was created by Little Taisui, who was a celestial venerable. Not to mention Gung Pengcheng, even a spiritual venerable like Dao Wuji would not be able to escape. Arbor looked up at Yuan Shichun and Mo Yen. The two nodded to him and glanced at the sobbing Dun Zong at the same time. Are you thinking of going back to the furnace to be rebuilt? If you don't like this body, I can help you get rid of it at any time. When the time comes, I'll refine you into a human. Would you like it? It's the kind of human puppet with blood coming out of its eyes. It'll scare ordinary people when it goes out. The black-hearted duo seamlessly connected their words. Their threatening words smashed into Dun Zong's face. He was so scared that he immediately stopped crying. He no longer dared to make any more sobbing sounds. Humph. Be an honest person. Do you know what you're going to say when you go out later? Be smart. Chapter 2086. If I finish this matter, can I change into a handsome body? Sure. Mo Yen nodded amiably and sized up Dun Zong. As long as you finish this matter, you can change into whatever body you want. Male, female, old, young, tiger, leopard, wolf, snake, you can change as you wish. You, don't fool me. Dun Zong pointed at Mo Yen and whined. I know. If my soul completely fuses with this body, in the future, it will be very, very difficult to peel it off. Then do you want to come out right now? I can peel it off right now. Do you want me to peel it off? The quarreling duo came online again. After a round of angry insults, the weak Dun Zong pitifully ran out and covered his face as he cried, You two are bad people. Arbor had a speechless expression and raised his hand to tug at Mo Yen's sleeve. Isn't that bad? He's so weak, I don't know if he'll be exposed in 3 sentences in front of Madame Fong. Don't worry. Yuan Shichun said with a smile. Dun Zong is a quick-witted person. He looks funny, but he can basically complete the tasks assigned to him properly. Master, if I sacrifice my body, I'll lose my chastity this time. In the future, Kiki must treat me well. Dun Zong ran back again and ran away like a rabbit after saying this. Arbor had a baffled expression on his face and didn't understand at all. What did he just say he would sacrifice? Yuan Shichun couldn't help but want to laugh. She coughed lightly and shook her head. Nothing. Arbor looked at Mo Yen blankly. It's just letting him pretend to be the Shuntian Prefecture's prefecture master. How can it rise to that level? Yuan Shichun's mouth twitched. She thought that Dun Zong wouldn't want to take this opportunity to do something with Sun Yang's middle-aged Madame Fong, right? That the 3 of them walked out side by side. Arbor said as he walked, Lotus, I want 10,000 pieces of jade, just about the same size as the ebony pieces. Okay, Mo Yen nodded and looked at her with a smile. Can Jojo draw jade talismans now? Arbor nodded. I don't know if I can do it for the first time, but I think with more practice, practice makes perfect. Mo Yen patted her head and said, Of course. Back then, Jojo was still a little girl in a small shop in a deserted village. She would be envious of a few blank talisman papers. In the blink of an eye, he had become a profound great talisman master, and was able to draw jade talismans. Mo Yen sighed with emotion. She held Arbor's little hand and walked forward slowly. When the 3 of them walked out, they happened to hear Dun Zhu scolding his subordinates, Why are you making such a fuss? Go, tidy up the rear courtyard and arrange for the guests to stay. Third young Miss Mu Ro Ku, who had been waiting for them outside the central room, breathed a long sigh of relief and nodded approvingly at Dun Zhu. It seemed that this Shuntian Prefecture's prefecture lord was also a smart person. Madame Fong walked forward with Fairy Lingfei's help and apologized to Arbor and the others. This concubine was too anxious before and didn't know what to do. Fortunately, I didn't hurt the guests. Otherwise, this concubine's heart would really be uneasy. Arbor nodded. They didn't say anything more to Madame Fong and followed the pageboy who led the way to a courtyard to rest. Before they left, they sneaked a glance at Madame Fong. They felt that this woman wasn't simple. The moment Arbor's gaze fell on Madame Feng's back, it automatically shifted away. Chapter 2087. She decided that it would not be too late to act after investigating what happened back then. In her opinion, Gung Pengcheng was no different from a dead man. Before that, she had to clarify some things. The next afternoon, Arbor and his group, who had rested for the night, were invited to the main hall of Shantian Prefecture. In order to entertain everyone, Prefecture Lord Gung, oh no, Dunju, not only did he invite Arbor and his group, he also invited many sect masters of Shantian Prefecture. Madame Fong sat beside Dunju with exquisite makeup. Huang He and Ling Fei stood behind her. The banquet was filled with singing and dancing. Everyone toasted each other and chatted happily. Many sect masters brought their children to attend the banquet. Although they did not say anything, their eyes seemed to wander around the main seats. Prince Mo and Miss Chiao sat there. Although they did not speak, they inexplicably made people feel wary. Ha ha ha. Suddenly, a bald middle-aged man with a big round face stood up from his seat. He raised his cup and smiled rudely at Dunzong. Manor Lord Gung, this must be the Crown Prince of King Jianping from the Divine Land. No one knew that the Crown Prince of Jianping had already left Shantian Prefecture that night. Perhaps he had already returned to the Divine Continent. Dunju waved his hand and turned to Mo Lien and Arbor. Your Highness, Crown Princess, this is the sect master of Six Sons Sect, Qin Guang. Dunju could not help but want to cry when he thought of these sect masters. Last night, he had been kicked into Fish Orchid Planet by Hu Jichen. He had read a lot of old and new information about Shantian Prefecture. His eyes were red and swollen. He had spent 4 days on Fish Orchid Planet from one night to the next. He had memorized all the information that he needed to memorize. This feeling was extremely satisfying. Sect Master Qin Guang, this is the Crown Prince of the Divine Continent. He is not the Crown Prince of Jianping you mentioned. That is the Crown Princess. The Six Sons Sect's Qin Guang was instantly filled with reverence, and he turned to bow toward Mo Lien and Xiao Mu. My apologies for my lack of manners. This one didn't know that His Highness the Crown Prince had graced us with your presence. If my words have offended your Highness, please forgive me. His small Six Sons sect might be one of the top powers in Shantian Prefecture, but in a place as big as Divine Continent, it could not even be considered as a small fry. Mo Lien didn't say anything and only nodded faintly. Although the sect leader of the Six Sons sect wanted to be on good terms with the Crown Prince, he could only sit down resentfully when he saw the Crown Prince's cold expression. Obviously, the Crown Prince of the Divine Land was not someone who liked to get close to people. When the other guests saw this, they hurriedly stood up and bowed to Mo Lien and Arbor. Soon after, they took their seats again. Both the host and the guest enjoyed themselves to the fullest. Madame Fong glanced at Dunzong, who was sitting beside her, and frowned slightly. Madame Fong was unhappy that the prefecture master did not return last night. She sent someone to ask around this morning, but she didn't hear anything about the prefecture master spending the night with any of his concubines. Even the prefecture master did not spend the night with his new favorite vixen, Min Yang. As she was thinking, she heard a crisp sound. Madame Fong looked up, and her face darkened. The person who came was a woman with a graceful figure. Half of her face was covered by a white veil. Her cold eyes scanned the entire place. When they landed beside Mo Lien, she couldn't help but tremble. It's her. It's really her. Just like that, he sat there silently, his face still expressionless. She wasn't seeing things. Chapter 2088. The woman stared blankly in Prince Mo's direction for a long time until Madame Feng's reprimanding voice reached her ears. Min Yang, what are you doing here? Madame Feng's expression was ugly, and her voice was not polite at all. The woman raised her head to glance at Madame Feng. She stood proudly and stared at her coldly. Min Yang is here to perform a dance on the orders of the prefecture lord. Madame Feng glared fiercely at Prefecture Lord Gung. Dun Zhu immediately laughed awkwardly. He thought that this was probably an agreement between Shuntian Prefecture's prefecture lord and this woman called Min Yang. He really knew nothing about it. Seeing the undercurrent between the wives and concubines, Dun Zhu hastily coughed dryly and said with a smile, "Since you're here, let's begin." This woman called Min Yang had a pretty good figure. What did she look like under the veil? Dun Zhu subconsciously rubbed his chin and smacked his lips. His gaze landed on the woman. When Madame Feng saw this, a trace of anger flitted across her face. She hatefully shifted her gaze away from the young woman. Damned slut! An unknown little slut from all walks of life dared to compete with her. Everyone, please wait for a moment. After Min Yang left, everyone repeatedly praised Prefecture Lord Gung for his ability to manage the household and for the harmony between his wives and concubines. They showered Dun Zhu with praise, making that fellow feel as if he was floating in the air. When Arbor saw this, she turned her little head to glance at Prince Mo, unreliable. Mo Lien could not help but want to laugh. She raised her hand and squeezed her little hand. We'll have Jichen teach him a lesson later. Soon, Min Yang appeared in front of everyone again. This time, she had changed into a pastel dress and brought along 2 rows of coquettishly dressed dancers. When the music started, Min Yang began to dance. Her figure was extremely lithe. With a leap, she spun in midair. Green ribbons fluttered as the dancers flicked their sleeves, setting off the young woman who was as bright as the moon in midair. Min Yang's pink and colorful dress spread out in the air, forming a beautiful circle of flowers. The layers were as graceful as white clouds piled on top of each other. Her loose skirt slid from the air all the way to the ground. The transparent gauze wings at the end were like the wings of a colorful divine bird. At first glance, it was truly shocking. Arbor hurriedly turned to look at Prince Mo, who was sitting beside him. Seeing him looking at her with a smile, she pretended not to see his mischievous gaze. She pursed her lips and said seriously, "So many people are looking at Min Yang. Why are you staring at me?" Prince Mo held the white jade cup in one hand, the sparkling wine inside slightly swaying. Her jade-like face was filled with smiles. He tilted his head and stared at her. He smiled and said, "No one is prettier than my wife." She couldn't deny that she was in a good mood at this moment. She felt a little refreshed, but Xiao Mu still snorted expressionlessly. Glib-tongued. "It's completely from the bottom of my heart." He reached out and caressed her smooth little face. Pink skeletons, beautiful women's bones. Everything is like smoke and dust that will eventually disappear. In this crown prince's eyes, there's only my wife, Jojo. Arbor suddenly turned her little head and faced him with the back of her head. Her 2 little claws involuntarily reached out to cover her little face. It's over. Her heartbeat was beating irregularly again. It was fluttering, as if it was about to struggle out of her heart. Chapter 2089. Miss Qiao reflexively checked her own pulse. Her pulse was steady, neither floating nor sinking, neither late nor late. Logically speaking, it should be very normal. But her heartbeat was unusually fast. Mo Lien naturally saw her little movements and couldn't help but laugh out loud. He moved his head close to hers and said softly, "Baby, turn around and look at me. You keep looking at me with the back of your head." "I'm panicking." Miss Qiao hastily covered her burning face with her hands. It was over. She always felt that this person's voice was very seductive. It was low and deep, like rolling beads falling on a jade plate, and even had a bit of magnetism to it. It was hard to believe that this man was flirting with her in front of so many people. Arbor suddenly turned her head to look at him, but didn't expect this man to move so quickly and steal a kiss from her lips. It really happened in the blink of an eye. Arbor's little fist reached out and landed in his palm. "Don't mess around." He laughed lowly. "Who's messing around?" Miss Chiao glared at him angrily. "Here, my little cutie, I've peeled an orange for you." Mo Lien's eyes narrowed slightly, and he reacted quickly by pulling his wife onto his lap. With a flick of his sleeve, he instantly deflected several arrows. Chi, after a few light sounds, the arrows pierced into the pillars in the hall. Arbor started and looked back. She saw that the group of dancers who'd been singing and dancing had all summoned their weapons from their inner worlds and were charging in Dun Zhen's direction. Dun Zhen had been used to peace these past few years. When had he ever seen such a tense and exciting scene? He couldn't react in time. "My mother." Dun Zhen had the urge to immediately rush to He Chen and hide behind him. Except that He Chen's sudden and deep gaze alerted him. He immediately came back to his senses and sat upright on his throne, aggrieved. He didn't move at all. "You weren't scared, were you?" Mo Lien pulled Jojo over and stood 3 feet away from the table before looking down at her. Arbor blinked and couldn't help but roll her eyes at the sky. She was already at the 4th level of the spirit realm, how could she be frightened by such a scene? Chirp. Her cheeks were suddenly kissed by him. Arbor glanced at him and saw the man take a deep breath. He grabbed her little hand and pressed it against his chest. "But your husband is a little scared." Arbor. In such a tense atmosphere, he still had the mood to joke with her. Although they could sit on the sidelines and watch a group of dancers chase after Dun Zong, from time to time they could point out a dancer's moves and analyze 1 or 2 of her moves. But he still had to be a bit more honest. Mo Lien giggled as he looked down at her. "Wife, these women are so scary. You must protect your husband well." The little fellow suddenly reached out and pinched his face. "Stop fooling around. If you don't save Dun Zhen now, I'm afraid Dun Zhen's body will be destroyed again." Mo Lien pulled down her little hand in amusement and nodded. "Okay. If you want me to save him, I'll save him." With that, he pointed a finger and blocked a few arrows that were flying in front of Dun Zhen. Dun Zhen had been frantically fending off the dancers' attacks. When he saw Mo Lien make a move, he couldn't help but tear up. His boss had finally finished flirting with Miss Chiao. He finally had the time to turn around and look at him, this pitiful person. "Bastard. I've been waiting for this day for a long time. Wash your neck and prepare to die." Chapter 2090. When he heard this, Dun Zhen's mind was in a mess. He saw a pink figure charging straight at him with a bright silver sword in her hand. She was about to slash down at his face. Did Min Yang write, direct, and act out an assassination drama? In the blink of an eye, he instinctively retaliated, throwing out a bolt of lightning that smashed onto Min Yang's sword. The sword couldn't bear the heavy blow and tilted slightly to the left. Min Yang's body sank. She rolled on the ground and got up again. She persevered and stabbed her sword at his chest again. Heavens! Dun Zhen frowned miserably. His entire face was scrunched up. He was a celestial venerable, but now he was trapped in the body of a spirit realm cultivator. It was really grieving. He suddenly felt that the world was full of malice toward him. Dun Zhen only felt that his vision was dark. He was a celestial venerable, a celestial venerable. That was a transcendent realm cultivator. Sob, sob, sob. He was actually being beaten up by a spirit realm woman. Sob, sob, sob. How big was the shadow in his heart right now? Bam! After Madame Fong threw a dancer out, her eyes flashed as she looked back at Dun Zhen. Lightning spirit. When did the mansion master cultivate the power of the lightning spirit? While she was thinking, a dancer pounced at her without any regard for her life. She bared her fangs and brandished her claws, full of anger, as if she was determined to die together with her. Even if she was stabbed by the sword in her hand, she still charged at Madame Fong with the power of self-explosion. Madame Fong couldn't help but turn pale with fright. She kept retreating. That person didn't give up. Madame Feng's face was full of panic. She hurriedly reached out and dragged Fairy Ling Fei, who was standing behind her, over. She quickly and skillfully pushed Fairy Ling Fei out to block the power of the self-explosion. Bam! Senior Sister Ling Fei. The little yellow crane's face was full of disbelief, as if it was the first day it met its master. It stared at her in a daze. Just now, what happened? Master actually pushed Senior Sister Ling Fei out to block the attack. She did so without any hesitation. It was as if Senior Sister Ling Fei was just a cat or a dog that could be used to amuse or block evil spirits for her master at any time. Although the kabuki was only a great mystic cultivator, the power of her self-detonation was not to be underestimated. Ling Fei was caught off guard and was caught in the middle of the explosion. Her cheeks were burned and her left eye was damaged by the explosion. The entire hall was shaking. Senior Sister. Fairy Yellow Crane cried out anxiously and hurriedly ran towards Fairy Ling Fei. Madame Feng's face darkened. She reached out to grab her disciple and advised, "Don't go over there." "Master, why are you doing this?" Fairy Huang He subconsciously brushed away her master's hand. Madame Feng's expression was somewhat gloomy. "I didn't do it on purpose. At that time, Ling Fei was standing beside me and I had no choice but to pull Ling Fei over to block the attack." He had no choice. Fairy Yellow Crane's face turned pale and translucent. "You want to use Fairy Ling Fei to block the evil spirit because you have no other choice. When did Master become so frightening and unfamiliar? Scoundrel, watch my sword." The masked woman, Min Yang, once again got up from the ground and stabbed the sword in her hand at Dun Zhe. "Die, old man." Chapter 2091. Thinking quickly, Dun Zhu quickly reached out his arms and clasped them together, catching the masked woman's long sword in his palms. He quickly snatched it away and threw it to the ground with a dong sound. At the same time, he shamelessly pulled the masked woman into his arms. Slap! The woman immediately flicked her sleeve and gave him a heavy slap. This scene happened too quickly. By the time everyone reacted, they only saw a red palm print on Dun Zhu's left cheek. A very distinct palm print was left behind by 5 fingers. The scene was too beautiful, and some couldn't bear to continue watching. All of a sudden, she really wanted to weep, but when she met Xiao Mu's calm and warning gaze, she restrained herself a bit. He turned to the crowd and said, "Everyone, I'm truly sorry that such a thing happened at the banquet. Let's end today's banquet first. After this manor head has dealt with these people, I'll invite everyone to another banquet to apologize." Everyone saw the red palm print on his cheek and his appearance was a bit strange. They all held back their laughter and nodded before leaving. After everyone left Shantian Prefecture's main hall, Dun Zhu finally couldn't bear it anymore. He turned around and roared at the masked woman who had fallen to the ground and had her neck and shoulders held down by several Shantian Prefecture's soldiers. "Don't hit people in the face, you know. This is too much. Min Yang. Manor head, Min Yang dared to openly gather so many people to assassinate you. It's obvious that she doesn't put our Shantian Prefecture in her eyes." Madame Fong said with conviction. "This woman must be executed immediately. If Manor head can't bear to do it, this concubine can do it for you. No need." Dun Zhu waved his hand and stopped Madame Fong from continuing. "Return to your own court first. You don't need to interfere with the interrogation of Min Yang. Let me handle it fully." Madame Fong gritted her teeth and said word by word, "Manor head, Min Yang attempted to assassinate you first and then ruined the banquet. She also alarmed His Highness the Crown Prince and the Crown Princess. If we don't punish her, will there still be rules in the entire manor?" Dun Zhu waved his hand impatiently. "I know how to deal with her." Seeing that Madame Fong was about to continue, Dun Zhu said angrily, "All right, go back to your court first. I'll let you know the results." Madame Fong left in a huff. She glanced at Fairy Huang He, who was several hundred steps away from her, and pursed her lips. "Huang He, come with me." Fairy Yellow Crane looked at Arbor blankly. This child had just witnessed with his own eyes that his master had pushed his senior sister out as a shield. Until now, it seemed that he still hadn't recovered from the shock. Arbor couldn't bear it and asked, "Do you want to stay?" "Huang He." Madame Fong raised her voice and glared at the motionless Fairy Huang He with a hint of anger in her eyes. Fairy Yellow Crane seemed to have received her orders and came back to her senses. She quickly nodded and left with Madame Fong. Lord Gung ordered his men to move the corpses of Min Yang and the dancers into the backyard. Min Yang sat there silently. Suddenly, she looked up at Arbor, who was standing not far away. Slim and elegant, she radiated the moonlight. She simply stood there, but it was as if the entire world had been lit up by her. "I want to see who exactly you are." Dun Zhu reached out his demonic claws and tore off the silk handkerchief on Min Yang's face without another word. Chapter 2092. The silk handkerchief fell down, but Xiao Mu was a bit shocked and flabbergasted at the face behind it. Her icy gaze landed on Min Yang's face, and she didn't say anything for a long time. However, Mo Lien, who was standing next to her, vividly sensed the fluctuations in her emotions. "What is it?" Mo Lien hastily pulled her to her side and hugged her waist, patting her comfortingly. "It's you." Arbor gritted her teeth and coldly stared at the woman. The woman lowered her head slightly and looked at the ground without saying a word. Little Taisui and the others glanced at Arbor in confusion. Judging from the little fellow's tone, it seemed like this woman called Min Yang was someone the little fellow knew. "Yi Ling Min, I thought you were dead already. I didn't expect you to still be alive." Arbor suddenly raised her hand, which contained layers of frost that gradually formed sharp icicles. "Little junior sister. No, you can't kill me right now. Little junior sister." Yi Ling Min abruptly looked up, her previously calm gaze gone, and her body trembled as she softly called out. "Give me a reason not to kill you." Arbor's tone was as cold as ice, and everyone could hear a tangible killing intent in her crisp voice. "Murong Sun is dead. Third Ant Master is dead. Eldest senior sister, second senior sister, and the others are all dead." Arbor angrily roared in agitation. "Why don't you die? You're the one who harmed so many people in the sect. What reason do you have to continue living in this world? Shouldn't you go to hell and be their slave to apologize?" "Yes. I want to apologize. I will indeed die. But not now." Yi Ling Min abruptly looked up and stared straight at Xiao Mu. She practically mustered all her strength to yell, "Not now. Little junior sister. There will be a day when I will willingly die. But not now. Reason." Xiao Mu stared at her frigidly, and the icicles in her hand stood erect. Under the illumination of the setting sun, those icicles seemed to be plated with a layer of hazy yellow. Yi Ling Min crawled a few steps forward and said calmly, "I've already found some clues. Although that Lu Yizhi is from Shuntian Prefecture, he came to our sect to seize the sacred water entirely out of his own selfish desires. That's right. He saw you using the mythical water in the competition, so he wanted to steal it. Didn't Murong Sun tell you not to use the holy water in front of other people? What's the point of telling me this?" Xiao Mu ruthlessly kicked Yi Ling Min to the ground, causing her to roll down several floors along the steps. If you tell me all this, will my master come back to life? Yi Lingmin. Today, I will clean up the sect on behalf of my master and get rid of a future trouble like you for the sect. Yi Lingmin's body trembled and she pounded the ground. Little junior sister. You must not know about heavenly fate, right? What I'm investigating right now not only concerns our entire sect but also the future of our Seacombe planet. You greedy coward. How dare you quibble in front of me? I'm not quibbling. I know Gung Pengcheng has a well-hidden private army. If we want to get rid of the entire Shantian prefecture, we must deal with this private army first. You don't need to worry about Shantian prefecture's affairs. Right now, you just need to die obediently. Chapter 2093. The look in Yi Lingmin's eyes changed slightly. She suddenly turned around and shot backwards. She was fast, but she didn't expect Arbor to be even faster. In the blink of an eye, Arbor was already in front of her. In an instant, a layer of jade-like hands wrapped around Yi Lingmin's throat. Yi Lingmin was shocked. She thought that with her current cultivation, she would be able to completely crush this junior sister. She didn't expect that after 3 years, her junior sister's growth would be on par with hers. She had been in Shantian Prefecture for the past 3 years. Her growth should have been faster than her junior sister's. But now that Yi Lingmin couldn't help but laugh bitterly. This was probably due to the difference in their talents. Little junior sister's growth speed was simply breathtaking. Yi Lingmin was quick-witted in a moment of desperation, and her entire body abruptly leaned backwards, evading Qiao Mu's fierce choke hold. However, her left shoulder was scraped by an ice spike. A thin cut appeared instantly. Yi Lingmin did 2 quick somersaults and dodged to the side. With one hand on the ground, she panted slightly. Yi Lingmin looked up at Arbor. Why didn't you fight back? Arbor asked coldly. Junior sister. I won't fight back. Yi Lingmin gritted her teeth. She turned to look at Shantian Prefecture's prefecture lord, Gung Pengcheng. A trace of confusion flashed through her eyes. From the beginning until now, the mansion master had been standing there quietly. This action was too strange. She didn't have time to think. She flipped over and jumped onto the back of a goshawk that appeared in the sky. Junior sister, I will definitely give you an explanation. Yi Lingmin threw out this sentence and flew away with the goshawk. Arbor didn't make a move. The others didn't either. Miss Qiao's eyes were like torches. She stared in the direction Yi Lingmin left. She suddenly turned around and walked out of Shantian Prefecture without saying anything. In the courtyard of Shantian Prefecture's matriarch, Madame Feng. The Crown Prince of Shenzhou and the others have just left. Ahem, ahem. Madame Feng listened to the guard's report and nodded. Although she had grabbed the Ling Fei to block it, it was still the power of the explosion, and it had happened at close range. The aftershock of the explosion had also affected her. In addition, he had suffered some injuries before, so his current condition was not very good. Ling Fei had been placed on a stretcher made of vines and grass. It was now parked outside the courtyard and looked to be on the verge of death. As for Fairy Yellow Crane, she stood far away in a daze, staring blankly at Madame Feng. Seeing her like this, Madame Feng's mood worsened. Madame Feng forcefully slapped the armrest of the chair, coughed a few times, and angrily said, Huang He, if you have anything to say, just say it. Master. I feel that the matter of you pushing senior sister Ling Fei out. It was not right at all. Without waiting for Fairy Huang He to finish, Lady Feng's face darkened and she said angrily, You don't need to care about this matter. Go and rest. But master. Shut up. Madame Feng flew into a rage out of humiliation and scolded, Things have already come to this. What else do you want me to do? Fairy Yellow Crane's head drooped. There were some different emotions in her heart as she slowly dragged her feet back to her courtyard. It was her master who had clearly told her to say whatever she wanted to say. In the end, she was chased away by her master before she could even finish a sentence. Looking at the boundless road ahead and the broken branches and shadows in the courtyard under the setting sun, Fairy Yellow Crane's heart felt stuffy, as if she was holding in a breath. It was very uncomfortable. Chapter 2094. When night fell, a heavy downpour accompanied by thunder boomed. Fairy Yellow Crane hadn't been sleeping very well to begin with. Now that she was struck by lightning, she jumped up in fright. She pushed open the window and looked at the pouring rain outside. The pitch-black curtain of the night seemed to have a hole in it, and the rain poured down from above. A familiar scream suddenly entered Huang He's ears, causing her entire body to tremble. The maid beside her pushed open the door, took a cloth from the shelf, and wiped the rain off her body. "Miss, the night is cold, why are you standing at the window in such a strong wind and rain?" Huang He hurriedly walked towards the door. "That scream seems to be Senior Sister Lingfei's." "Yes, I heard news from Madame's court that Fairy Lingfei's condition seems to have worsened." The maid hurriedly took an umbrella from the side and opened it, following Fairy Huang He out. Yun Shui, quickly bring a cloak for Mississippi, miss, you're still going out so late." The maid called Yun Shui hurriedly ran over, holding a thick cloak in her hands. She helped the previous maid cover her with the cloak. Fairy Huang He did not speak, only tightly pursing her lips as she quickly walked out of the door. Yun Shui hurriedly took an umbrella and opened it as well. The three of them, master and servant, walked quickly through the pouring rain to Madame Feng's courtyard. Creak. When the door opened, Fairy Huang He did not care about the maid holding the umbrella for her and hurriedly walked in. However, there was no one in the court. Huang He stood in the empty courtyard in astonishment. He looked around in a circle. Senior Sister Lingfei won't be unable to make it through tonight, right? Huang He muttered to herself. Although Lingfei had a bad temper, after so many years together, she had long regarded her as a sister. Master is so ruthless. "Miss, there's no one here, why don't we go back first?" Yun Shui was a little timid. She pulled Huang He's hand and could not help but mutter softly. The other maid didn't say anything. She stood beside Huang He and tried her best to hold an umbrella for her, shielding her from the storm. However, the rain was too heavy. How could 2 oil paper umbrellas block it? The master and servant trio had come all the way from their own court, and were already covered in rain. "Let's go in and take a look. You guys stay here. Yun Shui, wait for me at the door. I'll go in with Mississippi, Changfeng, miss, be careful." Fairy Yellow Crane took large strides and ran towards the corridor. She followed the 10-meter-long corridor and searched for Fairy Lingfei from room to room. Changfeng's whole body was soaked by the rain. At this time, her whole body was shivering, but she gritted her teeth and asked, Miss, there is something wrong here." Something was not right. Not even a servant girl who did rough work was in her master's courtyard. Where did everyone go at this time? The master and servant looked at each other and continued to walk to the backyard with full vigilance. After entering the most remote room in the backyard, Fairy Yellow Crane's footsteps paused slightly as her gaze focused on the bookshelf at the side. There seemed to be a passageway that the people who entered were careless and did not completely close. Therefore, the gap was especially eye-catching at this moment. Fairy Yellow Crane's eyes were sharp, and she instantly saw it. Mississippi, the maid held her arm nervously. Huang He took a deep breath and steeled her heart. "Let's go." Huang He quickly walked into the passageway with Changfeng. Chapter 2095. This passageway was not long, and there were only a few dozen flights of stairs down. Soon, they reached the end. 2 fiendish stone lions appeared in front of them, one on the left and one on the right, squatting there like door gods. Fairy Yellow Crane could not help but feel puzzled. I wonder if the master knows about this secret passageway in master's backyard. Young miss, listen. Chang Feng suddenly said. Fairy Yellow Crane naturally already heard it. It was senior sister Ling Fei's painful cry that came from the depths of the dark passageway. Young Mississippi, Chang Feng suddenly grabbed Fairy Yellow Crane's hand, her whole body trembling. She did not know why, but she seemed to have a bad premonition in her heart. She kept feeling that this place was very dangerous, and it was best to leave as soon as possible. Stay here. Chang Feng. Fairy Yellow Crane decisively threw down these words and hurriedly walked inside. At the end of this passageway were several small rooms with iron doors. When Fairy Yellow Crane walked over, one of the iron doors suddenly made a bang sound, and then a withered hand like dry wood was placed on the small window of the iron door. Yellow Crane inexplicably jumped in fright and abruptly turned her head. With just a glance, she was so frightened that her whole body shrank back. Senior sister. She took a step forward and leaned against the small window of the iron door, staring straight at the person with disheveled hair inside, whose face was almost indistinguishable. Beautiful fairy. The maid who followed her young miss also stared with round eyes, looking at the person inside the iron door in disbelief. Yellow Crane only felt her heart beating violently. Suddenly, she saw a beautiful fairy inside the iron door rush forward, her two pitch-black lips open to an unimaginable width, revealing a mouthful of terrifying fangs. Yellow Crane's hand shrank back, causing the fangs to fall through the air. Chang Feng hurriedly grabbed her young miss and pulled her back several steps. Young miss, what is this place? Why is beautiful fairy here? Yellow Crane was also very puzzled. Several months ago, beautiful senior sister was seriously injured in Julu City. When she was sent back to Shuntian Prefecture's main residence, her teeth were broken and her nose was crooked. At that time, Master glanced at beautiful senior sister and told them that he had contacted a divine doctor who would send beautiful senior sister out for treatment for a period of time. This was the so-called treatment. Master. Huang He clenched his fists tightly. He suddenly turned around and ran a few steps. Suddenly, he stood still in a daze. Senior sister Ling Fei was tied to two iron pillars. At this time, her face was already beyond recognition. Her bulging eyes were scarlet, and she was letting out a roar that was neither human nor beast. Madame Feng was standing at the side, looking coldly at her little disciple, Huang He, who had barged in. Master. Fairy Yellow Crane looked at the woman in front of her in a daze. Flowers are the same every year, but people are different every year. Huang He didn't know when her master had become someone she couldn't understand at all. Huang He, since you're here, come and take a look. Madame Feng nodded at her. Master, what are you doing? What are you doing? I'm saving your senior sister. You turned senior sister Ling Fei into such a hideous state, and you said you were saving her. What do you know? Originally, your senior sister would not have been able to survive after being affected by the explosion. Now, I'm just changing her a little and changing her way of living. You're doing this. Have you asked senior sister's opinion? Fairy Yellow Crane's whole body trembled. She clenched her fists tightly and asked angrily. Chapter 2096. Senior Sister Beauty, it was also you who made them like that. Master, what are you trying to do? Why did you make them look like half human half ghost? Huang He, do you know why Beauty and Ling Fei ended up like this? Madame Feng stepped in front of her and looked straight at Fairy Yellow Crane, suddenly saying sternly, that's because they weren't strong enough. This is the way of the world. Weaklings, don't think there's a place to reason. Only by continuously becoming strong, trampling everyone under your feet and standing at the peak. Only then can you look down on the earth and see everything as ants. Madame Feng stretched out her hands and raised them above her head, her sharp gaze locked onto Fairy Yellow Crane. Yellow Crane, you are only in your 20s, your life has just begun. You don't understand all of this, Master doesn't blame you. But how much have you seen of the darkness of this world? Not even 1 in 10,000. You stay by Master's side, usually you like to fiddle with those useless flowers and plants, and study your medical knowledge, Master doesn't care about you. But today, you must stand on Master's side. Support everything that I do. Madame Feng's face was distorted as she approached Fairy Yellow Crane step by step. Only Master has succeeded. Only then can you continue to live your comfortable life. Continue to fiddle with your flowers and plants, and don't need to look at anyone's face. Be your Shantian Prefecture's Fairy Yellow Crane, right? Looking at her master who was almost crazy, Fairy Yellow Crane trembled all over and lowered her head. Yellow Crane, do you know? Many years ago, Master was also just an ordinary person. Master failed in opening her meridians, and thought that this would be it in this lifetime. But now, do you see? Master possesses great power, and all of this was obtained through Master's continuous hard work and struggle. Is Master wrong? Is there anything wrong? Is it wrong for a person to want to become strong? Fairy Yellow Crane suddenly raised her head, Master. You. Senior Sister Beauty and Senior Sister Lingfei, why did they turn into corpse puppets? They were clearly still alive, clearly not infected. It's you. It's you who turned them into corpse puppets as test subjects. That's because they were stupid. Madame Feng's expression was agitated, and she suddenly took out a transparent medicine bottle from her sleeve. Do you see this? This kind of medicinal liquid could make an ordinary person strong. Huang He. Do you want to improve your cultivation further? Believe me, I won't harm you. Your 2 senior sisters are stupid and can't be put to good use. If that wasn't the case, how could they have evolved into corpse puppets? Instead of becoming a superhuman? Huang He, I believe that you will never become like Ling Fei and Beauty. Don't come over. Fairy Yellow Crane's body trembled as she retreated step by step. Chang Feng even trembled as she held her young miss's hand tightly, supporting her young miss as they retreated step by step. Had the manor mistress gone mad? Why did she become so scary? Chang Feng's eyelashes trembled as she dragged her young miss back step by step. Huang He. This bottle was a heaven-defying and fate-changing medicinal liquid. How many people could only dream of obtaining it? Why are you staring at your master with such a fearful expression? Believe me, as long as you swallow this medicinal liquid, you will immediately obtain a unique ability. Even if your cultivation is lacking, you will at least have an ability to defend yourself in the future. Young miss, young miss. Chang Feng suddenly pushed Fairy Yellow Crane back. Go. Chapter 2097. Right now, Madame Feng looked too abnormal. If Miss continued to stay here, nothing good would come out of it. Even if Chang Feng risked her life, she could not let Miss die here. Fairy Huang He was a famous alchemist in Shantian Prefecture. In terms of cultivation, she was naturally not as outstanding as Ling Fei and Beautiful Fairy. With Chang Feng's forceful push, she stumbled forward a few steps. Turning her head, she saw Chang Feng pounce forward and hug Madame Feng. Turning her head, she saw Madame Feng standing still with tears in her eyes. She anxiously shouted, "Miss, run. Quickly run. Let go." Madame Feng was currently in a demonic state. Her hand formed a fist and fiercely smashed towards Chang Feng's back. With the first punch, Chang Feng spat out a mouthful of blood. There was blood at the corner of her mouth, but she still screamed anxiously at Huang He. With the second punch, Chang Feng spat out shattered internal organs. 2 streaks of black blood seeped out of the corners of her mouth. Her voice also sounded like she was on the verge of death. Huang He did not dare to stay any longer. With tears in her eyes, she turned and quickly ran out of the secret passage. From behind her came Madame Feng's deranged third punch, accompanied by the sound of Chang Feng spitting out blood. Fairy Huang He's heart ached. Tightly clenching her fist, she quickly ran out of the secret passage. Scram! Madame Feng saw that she had actually run away. A trace of hostility flitted across her face, and she fiercely kicked Chang Feng's body. He originally thought that with this kick, Chang Feng would definitely be sent flying. Unexpectedly, Chang Feng tightly hugged her leg and desperately refused to let go. Madame Feng flew into a rage out of humiliation. She could only pull out a long sword and cut off Chang Feng's 2 arms. Then, she quickly chased upwards. Outside, the pouring rain did not stop at all. Huang He tightly grabbed Yun Shui, who was lingering at the gate of the courtyard, and madly ran out with her. What happened, miss? Where's Chang Feng? Where did Chang Feng go? Go. Huang He did not have time to explain in detail. She dragged Yun Shui out of Shuntian Prefecture. The rain on the streets converged. As the two fled, they stepped on the puddles on the ground, making splashing sounds. Huang He. Master has treated you well all these years. You actually dared to betray Master. Madame Feng's cold voice faintly came from behind them. Suddenly, a swift and fierce palm energy, carrying a terrifying spiritual pressure, attacked Huang He directly in front of him. Young miss. Yun Shui screamed and suddenly pounced in front of Fairy Huang He. Yun Shui. Yun Shui's battered body was swept away by her master like a withered quail and fell heavily to the ground. Fairy Yellow Crane hurriedly scrambled over. With trembling hands, she fished out Yun Shui, who was bleeding from the corner of her mouth, from the mud on the ground. Yun Shui, Yun Shui. You asked for it. Madame Feng's eyes flashed. Let's go, miss, let's go, miss. Yun Shui used all her strength to pull on Fairy Huang He's sleeve. Huang He shook his head and sobbed while holding Yun Shui's head. Miss, let's go, let's go. All these years, I'm indebted to young mistress for not forsaking me and treating me like a sister. Yun Shui. If there's an afterlife, I'll definitely chase after young mistress. Yun Shui. Fairy Yellow Crane crawled out of the muddy water and leaped up. Carrying Yun Shui, she flew to the roof and fled forward in a panic. Reckless fool. Madame Feng's eyes turned cold. She raised her hand and was about to lead a large group of Palace of Cold Blood disciples to chase after them when she suddenly heard a sharp whistle. Madame Feng frowned slightly and stopped. She looked back at the pitch-black night sky. Chapter 2098. The whistle sounded several times, a total of 8 times. Madame Feng knew that they could not stay any longer. She hurriedly led the disciples of the Palace of Cold Blood away. Boom! Outside the window, a flash of lightning woke Arbor up. He slowly opened his eyes in the dark night. He turned his head to look. Outside the window, heavy rain poured down, accompanied by the sound of thunder and lightning. The bright light illuminated the night until it was white. The little guy turned his face and lay on top of the quietly sleeping Prince Mo. He pursed his lips and stared at him for a long time. How could there be such a handsome man in the world? How did she have the fortune to meet such a person in this life? If she had missed him when she was 7. Arbor's heart shrank. He did not dare to imagine such a life. He felt that if he lost this person, he would lose his destination and hope. Miss Chiao reached out a small hand and gently traced his exquisite brows. She touched his cheeks and his hair, and her small hand finally stopped on his thin lips that were tightly pursed into a straight line. Sigh. A faint sigh came from his mouth. His phoenix eyes, which were originally closed, slowly opened under the dim light of the night. Miss Chiao shrunk her hand guiltily and fell on his chest. She then reached out two small hands and pulled up the blanket to cover her head, pretending that she had already fallen asleep. Wife, you've been touching me for almost an hour. You've even woken me up. Do you want to go to Mount Wu with your husband? Miss Chiao, who was guilty, felt that from her ears to her small face, there was not a single spot that was not burning. It was her fault. It was her fault for not sleeping in the middle of the night and touching him blindly. Arbor's eyes were round and bright. He suddenly poked his head out of the blanket and muttered in a small voice, You. If you can't endure it, then, you don't have to endure it anymore. Mo Lien was startled. His lips involuntarily pulled into a faint smile. Being touched by this little guy, his heart was in a mess. How could he fall asleep? He simply sat up with her in his arms. With a wave of his hand, a faint flame lit the two dim yellow candles in the room. You. Why are you lighting the lamp? Miss Chiao really wanted to give herself a slap. Why was she stuttering? The man lowered his head and glanced at her. His gaze was mischievous as he laughed in a deep voice. Of course, it's to take a good look at my wife. No, don't look. Arbor felt that his face was probably boiling. It was so hot that it could probably cook an egg. Arbor reached out to block his eyes and glanced into the room. Extinguish. Turn off the lights. That won't do. How can I look at my wife when the lights are off? Mo Lien laughed in a muffled voice. He reached out and took her little hand down. He pressed it against his thin lips and kissed it gently. Chiao, do you know how much I like you? His slender fingers caressed her small face inch by inch as his phoenix eyes stared straight at her with a smile. I'm willing to give you the most precious and beautiful things in the world. I want you to be the happiest woman in the world. My Jojo deserves the best. My Jojo deserves to be treated with all my heart and give everything. My Jojo. My Jojo. You're good like this. So good that he couldn't bear to see her suffer even the slightest bit. He didn't want her to casually follow him in this small and shabby place. Why are you so good to me? Arbor's eyes welled up with tears. Chapter 2099. Why are you so good to me? Miss Chiao murmured. If you keep spoiling me like this, what am I supposed to do when I ascend to the heavens? Arbor reached out to touch his face. Mo Lien could not help but laugh. Silly girl, of course it's because you're my Jojo. He was willing to protect his little wife like a precious jade or a pearl. If his wifey wanted to ascend to the heavens, there was nothing he could do. At most, he would ascend to the heavens with her. Arbor arched in his arms. Looking at him under the light, she felt that he was abnormally hazy and extraordinarily handsome, like an exquisite jade carving in front of her. He was truly carved and polished, a beauty like jade. The little fellow's claws very naturally stroked his well-defined waist and abdomen under his clothes. Mo Lien. What, haven't you touched enough? The man helplessly reached out to press down on her restless claws. Arbor moved in his chest, looked up at him, and said softly, Husband. Mo Lien's heart was about to melt when she called him husband. His little one was really too torturous. Prince Mo could not help but want to sigh. At this moment, the storm was raging outside, but the room was filled with intimacy. The sound of Fairy Yellow Crane banging on the inn's door resounded through the entire street in the silent night. Open the door. Yellow Crane threw herself against the door. It was unknown whether her face was covered in tears or rain, but it was mixed with mud and water. There was no way to see her exquisite makeup of the past. Who is it, disturbing my sleep in the middle of the night? It's long past check-in time, okay. The waiter ran out while cursing. The moment he opened the door, he saw a woman covered in filth, with water dripping from her head to her hair. She was carrying a corpse whose face could not be seen clearly as she barged in. The waiter was dumbfounded as he scolded, "Damn, what are you doing? Benefactor, little benefactor. Little benefactor." Fairy Yellow Crane's eyes were unfocused as she cried out. "You crazy woman. The person you're looking for isn't here. Get out." The waiter's face darkened as he looked at the wet floor of the lobby. Where did this lunatic come from? Knocking on the door in the middle of the night? Not only did he disturb people's sleep, he even brought a corpse to the inn. Bad luck, bad luck, bad luck. How unlucky. If you don't leave, I'll get someone to kick you out. The waiter said angrily. Benefactor, benefactor. In the room upstairs, Arbor suddenly moved. It sounds like Huang He's voice. Mo Lian's arm that was circling around her waist tightened slightly before loosening by an inch or so. It was such a good time, yet there were always people coming to disturb them. Prince Mo felt helpless. It was already the middle of the night, and he couldn't even fall asleep while hugging his wife. Let's go down and take a look. Huang He's voice sounded a little off. In her impression, this fairy yellow crane had always been rather amusing. But today, this hoarse roar had a thick nasal tone. Could it be that something had happened? Mo Lian got up first, and picked up a lotus leaf-colored outer robe for the little fellow to wear. After tying a light yellow belt, he hugged this soft little fellow and kissed her. Then, he said, "Let's go." He reached out and took the black robe hanging on the clothes rack, and casually put it on himself. The two walked out of the room hand in hand. Yellow Crane's ruckus in the middle of the night was so loud that all the residents on the second floor of the inn got up and opened their doors to take a look. Chapter 2100. Dao Wuji quickly walked to the two of them and scratched his head. "What's going on?" "We'll go down and take a look." "You guys rest first," Arbor said indifferently. "Forget it. You've already woken up. Let's go down together." Fairy Ginkgo giggled and took 2 steps forward, wanting to hold Arbor's arm. Mo Lien glared at her, but she didn't care. Since she wasn't going to hold her arm, she giggled and snuggled up to Arbor. "Little sister Qiao, big sister has always wanted to ask you. How can your skin be so good? It looks so fresh, like it's coated with a layer of jade. It's so bouncy." Fairy Ginkgo stretched out a finger and gently poked darling Qiao's cheek. Mo Lien glared at her with a murderous look. "Put down your paw." Ji Yichen was speechless. Dao Wuji couldn't help but twitch his mouth. Off to the side, little Tai Sui rolled its eyes at the heavens. "Big sister. You're so much older than her. Where did the word big sister come from?" Right. Dao Wuji hurriedly nodded. "Ginkgo, you don't even know this. Sis-in-law's skin is so good, it must be because she's young. Like you, you're already 100-year-old. No matter what, your skin can't be as smooth as a teenage girl's, like a peeled egg." Scram! Fairy Ginkgo aimed a punch at Dao Wuji's face. Although little Tai Sui snorted disdainfully at her, at least it had a brain and didn't mock her age. Did this Dao Wuji not want to live anymore? He actually dared to mock big sister as a 100-year-old. Old? This was simply intolerable. Arbor expressionlessly glanced at them and suddenly took out a box of ointment from her inner world. Exclusive beauty ointment. It removes wrinkles and preservatives, and maintains smooth and bouncy skin. Apply half a spoonful every morning and night. See results in half a month. After saying that, she threw the beauty cream to the Ginkgo fairy and walked forward with a da-da-da sound. Everyone, Fairy Peony couldn't help but laugh. "Ginkgo, you have good eyesight." She was simply too adorable. Not to mention the cold air around her, her actions from time to time always made people feel warm and cute. They really didn't know how to feel about it. Tap, tap, tap. Arbor took the lead and walked down the stairs. His gaze fell on the crazy fairy yellow crane in the hall. What's going on? Fairy yellow crane's battered and exhausted appearance startled her. She immediately quickened her pace and walked down the wooden stairs. The waiter had already called for a few helpers and was pushing Fairy Yellow Crane to chase her out of the inn. Upon seeing this, Xiao Mu hastily berated, "What are you doing? Stop!" The waiter and the others turned around. Seeing that it was the customers who stopped them, he hurriedly bowed to Arbor and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, are we disturbing your rest? Let's kick this crazy woman out right now." "No need." Arbor casually tossed a small bag of spirit coins to the waiter. "You don't need to care about this matter. Come back at dawn to clean up this place." The waiter lightly weighed it and knew that there were at least 20 spirit coins in this bag. Not to mention one corpse, even 10 corpses wouldn't be a problem. Seeing that this stoic-faced little girl was so generous, the waiter hurriedly beamed and nodded. "Yes, yes. Then, we'll leave first. Go go go." Chapter 2101. Yellow Crane. Little Benefactor. Fairy Yellow Crane stumbled over with Yun Shui in her arms, and threw herself in front of Arbor. Her lips trembled as she stammered, "Little Benefactor, save Yun Shui, save Yun Shui. I heard from Starlight Academy's Master Zhou that your medical skills are very impressive. You can definitely save her, Little Benefactor. Little Benefactor, save her, save Yun Shui." "Yellow Crane, don't be agitated, let me take a look first." Arbor saw her agitated expression, as if she had gone mad, and hurriedly reached out to comfort her. Fairy Yellow Crane clenched her fists tightly, kneeling beside Arbor. The water stains on her hair, the rain and mud on her body made her look very miserable. Arbor did not know what happened to her, and had her put Yun Shui on the ground. He reached out to touch Yun Shui's carotid artery, and slowly turned to look at Fairy Yellow Crane, who had a dazed expression and was staring blankly. "I'm sorry, she's already dead." Fairy Yellow Crane's tears streamed down her cheeks. She was completely dumbfounded. "Yellow Crane, Yellow Crane." Arbor softly called her twice. Fairy Yellow Crane suddenly reached out to hug Yun Shui's cold body, and wailed, "I'm useless. I'm just a black-grade alchemist, what am I? I gave her so many pills, and none of them were useful. I couldn't even save Yun Shui. I let Chang Feng and Yun Shui die in vain. I let them down, I let them down. Yellow Crane. Little Benefactor. Have you tasted the feeling of losing everything?" Yellow Crane's voice was hoarse, almost to the point of whispering, "I already have nothing now." Sect. Her sect could no longer tolerate her. Master actually wanted to turn her into a monster in a deranged manner. She escaped, but implicated the two maids closest to her. She really had nothing left. Arbor only felt his heart ache, and reached out to hold Fairy Yellow Crane's dirty shoulder. "I can tell you with certainty. I have. 3 years ago, I was like you, feeling as if I had lost everything. But in fact, as long as we don't give up on ourselves, no matter how difficult it is, no matter how bumpy the road is, we can start over." Fairy Yellow Crane lay on her shoulder, crying like a lost child. Tears and snot flowed down her face, and her heart was broken. "Can I really start over?" "Sure. Is that really okay?" "Yes." Arbor's firm and gentle voice repeatedly sounded in Fairy Yellow Crane's ears. "Little Benefactor, do you know? Master wasn't like that before. She's really good." Fairy Yellow Crane murmured. "Really, really good. I don't know when she started to become so scary and cold-blooded. Can he still be my master? I'm so tired, so tired. Little Benefactor, I feel like I'm at a loss. I don't know where the road ahead is." Arbor reached out and tightly grasped her ice-cold left wrist. "Yellow Crane, Yellow Crane. Seeing Yellow Crane gradually faint on her shoulder, Arbor reached out to support her, and beckoned to Fairy Peony and Ginkgo, "Come help. What's the matter with this clown?" Fairy Peony and Ginkgo flashed to her side, and raised their hands to support Fairy Yellow Crane. "I don't know for now." Arbor looked up at Emolien. The latter nodded at her. "I'll tell Tong to investigate." Chapter 2102. Thousands of miles in Sangzhou, a dazzling purple light suddenly rushed out of the inner hall of the Imperial Ancestral Temple, illuminating the entire Sangzhou. Regardless of whether it was the officials in the imperial court or the common people in the streets, all of them were alarmed by this soaring purple light. Everyone rushed to the streets, pointing at the sky and discussing enthusiastically. "Oh my God, what is that? It seems to be coming from the Imperial Ancestral Temple. I heard that Prince Chen was left in the Imperial Ancestral Temple half a month ago. It is said that he is inheriting the inheritance of the Devil Emperor." "No way, the legendary inheritance of the Devil Emperor, is there really such a thing? Then now. His Highness, did he succeed?" At this time, the two princes, who were sitting in the Crown Prince's East Palace and chatting with the Crown Prince, also noticed the change in the sky and immediately jumped up from their chairs. "Brother! Look outside." Romley walked out of the door with his two younger brothers with a cold face. The sky was completely dyed by the purple light, and the color was indescribably bright. Suddenly, a dragon's roar sounded, and a real dragon gradually emerged from the solid purple gas. It swung its tail and jumped, and its tail swept away a few drifting clouds. Romley felt his heart skip a beat, and an ominous premonition came to his mind. Damn it, did fourth brother succeed in inheriting the inheritance? How did he succeed in inheriting the blood of the Devil Emperor? What I am afraid of really happens. The second prince said angrily with a cold face, "This boy's luck is too good. Why does he always bump into all the good things?" Romley subconsciously clenched his fists, and his knitted eyebrows gradually relaxed. He suddenly said with a smile, "It seems that fourth brother has come out of seclusion. You and I naturally have to go and congratulate him. Eldest brother, you can still laugh." The second prince had a look of disappointment on his face. Imperial father already thinks highly of that kid. Now that he has inherited the 1,000-year-old legacy, how are you and I going to deal with it? Well, we should be happy that fourth brother can inherit the blood of the Devil Emperor. The second prince couldn't help laughing. You are very generous. Don't you feel indignant that you lost to such a young brat? Romley smiled noncommittally. When he turned to leave, his eyes suddenly turned cold. Hey, third brother, didn't you say you sent someone to investigate that painting? The second prince suddenly thought of this and asked with a smile. But there's still no clue. Hey, second brother, you don't say. I really did find some clues. Romley did not speak. He only slowed down his footsteps slightly. It was obvious that he had heard what the third prince had said. I started investigating from his hometown, Seacombe Planet. Guess what I found? The third prince proudly boasted, I originally wanted to tell you guys about this matter slowly, but now that fourth brother has come out of seclusion early, I naturally have to tell you guys, just in case. Just in case, the third prince didn't continue, but the other two understood. If Imperial Father really fell in love with fourth prince, it would be hard to say what would happen in the future. Do you all know who that woman in the painting is? The impatient second prince hurriedly patted the third prince. Alright, don't keep us in suspense. Hurry up and say it. That is the future crown princess of the Divine Land. What? Romley couldn't help but be taken aback. Chapter 2103. Was it true? The second prince was dumbfounded by the third prince's words. The third prince saw that the two of them didn't seem to believe him. So, he quickly picked out some important matters and told them to his two elder brothers. Old Fourth seems to have a good relationship with the Crown Prince of the Divine Province. Ronli muttered, I've also heard of that Crown Prince of the Divine Province. It's said that he's been wandering outside all year round. Could it be that he's about to return to the Divine Province? Younger brother doesn't know about this. Ronli couldn't help but sneer. When he turned around, his expression turned cold. It seemed that this fourth brother of his really wasn't simple. The second prince paused and said, Hey, how about we bring that painting and go see Royal Father? Ronli's expression flickered, and he calmly revealed a hint of embarrassment. That's not very good. Heh, we're not going to make things difficult for him. Aren't we all planning for his sake? Who knows, Royal Father might be happy and make a decision for our good fourth brother. So what if she's the future Crown Princess of the Divine Province? Isn't she still the Crown Princess of the Divine Province? Ronli's eyes flickered. In reality, he had long wanted to expose this matter to Royal Father, but he had always lacked an opportunity. Since the third prince was willing to take the lead, he naturally wouldn't dissuade him. Instead, he had to properly thank him for his righteous act. Go quickly. If Royal Father knew that he had such a cowardly son, he would definitely be very happy. On the other hand, Duan Yu had just stepped out of the Imperial Ancestral Temple when he was stunned by the carriage that came to welcome him. The officials who came to pay homage to the Fiend Emperor's bloodline all looked up at the tall and slender figure standing at the entrance of the Imperial Ancestral Temple, and they couldn't help but be spellbound. They couldn't pinpoint what had changed, but they felt that Prince Chen was very different from half a month ago. His entire aura had changed, right? Or perhaps the hidden cold sharpness in his eyes had changed. At this moment, His Highness looked especially reserved, like a treasured sword with hidden edges that could be used at any time to deliver a fatal blow. This old official, Wu Yong, greets Your Highness Prince Chen. No need to be so courteous, Left Prime Minister, Duan Yu said coldly. Left Prime Minister Wu Yong raised his eyes and then immediately lowered his head. He didn't dare to look directly at those beautiful eyes that were emitting a faint purple light. Those eyes were as cold as ice and the faint purple glow within them seemed to want to suck his old bones into them. How frightening. The Minister of the Left could be considered someone who was accustomed to grand occasions, but when he glanced at Duan Yu, he shuddered and was somewhat stunned. However, a tall and slender young man walked out from beside him and said with a smile, We are here to welcome Prince Chen out of seclusion under the order of the Emperor. Your Highness, please enter the carriage. We will escort Your Highness back to the palace. Your Highness, your forehead. Currently, there was a light purple imprint on Duan Yu's jade-like forehead that resembled 3 flower leaves. It only appeared for a split second before disappearing. Wu Yong was nearly frightened to death by this young man, and he fiercely glared at him before hastily dragging him behind him. He then cupped his hands at Duan Yu and said, Please, Your Highness. Duan Yu nodded indifferently and turned to board the carriage. The chamberlain lowered the layers of muslin curtains, and the carriage started moving. Duan Yu face-palmed with one hand, his expression somewhat fatigued. Woo! A little fox suddenly wriggled on his body and drilled out from his body. Chapter 2104. Woof! The little fox's claws crawled on his clothes. Duan Yu's lips involuntarily curled into a faint smile. In that instant, the iciness in his eyes completely dissipated. Sigh. With a sigh, he picked up the little fox and placed her on his shoulder. He patted her and said, Chestnut, if Xiao Xiao sees you like this, she won't like you anymore. Chestnut's claws forcefully crawled on his clothes, and it stuck out a small claw in protest, silently complaining while pointing at the sky and the ground. Tisk, isn't it just advancing to 8-tailed? You actually don't even have the ability to transform and even lost the ability to speak. Woof, woof. The little fox was cursing internally. It was actually disdained by this unreliable master. How infuriating. Was it his fault? If it weren't for him suddenly absorbing this whatever devil emperor bloodline crazily, how could it have become so wretched and inexplicably advanced to eight-tailed celestial fox? Chestnut, thank you for accompanying me, Duan Yu said softly as he stroked the little fox's glossy fur. The little fox arched on his shoulder and suddenly slapped his head with a paw. It pointed at the sky and the ground and whimpered again. Speak human language. Duan Yu calmly pulled away its paw and swept it a disdainful glance. Little fox, that when I advance to eight-tailed celestial fox, I'll definitely chirp by your ear every day until you can't sleep peacefully. Fairy Yellow he didn't sleep very well that night. She didn't wake up with a start until noon the next day, and she jumped out of bed in a flash. Oh, you're awake. Hurry and freshen up since you're awake. Come down for lunch. A female voice drifted in from outside the window, startling her. After she finished freshening up and went downstairs, Fairy Yellow he quickly walked up when she saw the people in the inn's main hall. After bowing towards Chiao Mu and the rest, Huang he said with slight embarrassment, yesterday, I've made a fool of myself in front of everyone. Alright, sit down and eat. Arbor pointed at the seat next to him, indicating for Fairy Yellow he to sit down. After Fairy Yellow Crane sat down uneasily, she opened her mouth and said, Little benefactor, He was interrupted by Arbor. We already know about what happened to you. Shuntian Hall was so big. Although everyone's hands couldn't reach into the main hall, they currently had the highest level of spies in the main hall. If one had the heart to investigate, there was nothing one could not find. Arbor really didn't expect that the palace lord of the Palace of Cold Blood was Tian Yun's man. At first, she only suspected that the Shuntian Mansion's mansion master, Gung Pengcheng, was colluding with the Heavenly Fate sect, but she didn't expect that the two of them were related to the Heavenly Fate sect. Indeed, birds of the same feather flock together. Fairy Yellow Crane looked at Arbor gratefully. Thank you very much for yesterday's matter. I didn't help much. Arbor scooped a bowl of rice and handed it to her. Do you have any plans for the future? Fairy Yellow Crane shook her head blankly. Let me give you a suggestion. Miss Chiao said expressionlessly, you can pay for 2 years of food and lodging and follow us for the time being. Everyone, ! Cough, 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 cough. Dao Wuji choked on a mouthful of soup. Arbor glanced at him, then turned to ask Mo Lien, hubby, did you charge? A certain crown prince, who was used to Jojo's habit of charging fees, silently twitched his mouth and shook his head. No, I didn't confiscate it. Arbor gave him a look that said, you've suffered a great loss. Then he turned to little Taisui and Dao Wuji and said, pay up. Chapter 2105. Everyone looked at her, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Dear, doesn't your conscience hurt when you say this? Arbor said expressionlessly, when my Aoyi and Xiaoyao followed me, they also paid. What she meant was, you people, how dare you not pay? Everyone, Hu Shichen chuckled and nodded repeatedly. Yes, yes, you should pay. Look at you guys, you've wasted so many years growing up Jojo, yet you still eat and use her things every day. You should pay. Make it up for 8 or 10 years at once. Aya, little sister Xiao Qiao, you gave me such a good beauty cream, so of course I have to pay. Fairy Ginkgo covered her mouth and smiled. With a flick of her sleeve, a small pile of rare treasures appeared on the table. Little sister Xiao Qiao, please kindly accept it. Arbor expressionlessly put the pile of things into her inner world and looked at Dao Wuji, little Tai Sui, and the others. After everyone silently handed over their things, they all looked at Hu Shichen, who was sitting on the side with a smile. Why doesn't he have to pay? Dao Wuji asked angrily. Isn't it obvious? How can I be the same as you? I was personally summoned by Jojo. I'm hers, and she's mine. With our relationship, do we still need to pay? What a joke. There are differences between close and distant, you know. Mo Yen cast him a sidelong glance before giving a noncommittal harumph. Moreover, I don't eat much, Hu Shichen said plausibly. Ha! Everyone looked at him coldly. Who was it that had to eat and drink well 3 times a day? And he said he didn't eat much? How shameless. Fairy Yellow Crane took out a bag of spirit coins from her pocket. 2 years of room and board. Here. Everyone, dot. Arbor nodded and accepted all the things that everyone handed over. She raised her hand and patted Yellow Crane's shoulder lightly. Don't worry, you won't be mistreated if you follow me. She paused, as if remembering something. She turned to Fairy Yellow Crane and said, You're one of us now. There's something I won't hide from you. The mouths of those who didn't know what was going on twitched. He had a feeling that Miss Chiao's next words would be more deceptive. As expected, Arbor glanced at the little Yellow Crane and said, Actually, that time in the lava mountains. The reason why you were besieged by thousands of profound beasts. It's because of me. I sprinkled some medicinal powder to attract profound beasts and attracted the group of profound beasts over. You guys are really unlucky. You just happened to walk over, so you were innocently implicated. Then, we'll need to hunt a bunch of beasts for the entrance exam of our top-notch academy. It'll be troublesome to find them all over the place. That's what I came up with. Everyone was speechless. The corners of Mo Yen's mouth twitched, and she couldn't help but put her hand to her forehead. The little fellow's serious face was expressionless as he continued, saving you afterwards was also an unintentional act. I'm not as selfless as you think. As teammates, we'll be on the same side from now on. I have to tell you this. Don't worry, I won't cheat you in the future. Everyone, dot. Pfft. Fairy Ginkgo guffawed. I can't take it anymore. Fairy Yellow Crane looked at her with a stupefied expression for a while before stammering, I know. Then, she said gratefully, Little benefactor, you're really a good person. You clearly didn't have to tell me this, but you still told me. Chapter 2106. Don't worry, we'll forget about our past lives and start anew in the future. I, Huang He, acknowledge you as my friend. Arbor was speechless. He had been given the good guy card for no reason. Xiao Mu felt ashamed to accept it, and she patted Huang He's shoulder as she said, MHM. Just call me by my name in the future. Don't call me benefactor, it's so annoying. Okay. Huang He nodded. I've already sent people to clean up that lady's remains. You can cremate her when you want. Huang He nodded and subconsciously clenched his fists. Okay. Come with me for a while after we eat. Move aside. Move aside. Move aside. A commotion suddenly came from outside the inn. Arbor and the others looked toward the source of the sound. The people at the door moved to the sides to make way for a wide passageway. A pair of black boots embroidered with gold thread appeared in front of everyone's eyes. He was like jade and his hair was soft. The man was wearing a dark purple robe and had a tall figure. He had a pair of seductive eyes that were slightly raised. He looked very enchanting and charming. A man could actually give people an inexplicable sense of charm. It was really indescribable. Ah! Jojo. That person stepped through the door as if he had discovered an alien planet. His eyes suddenly lit up and his gaze landed on Arbor. Mo Yen put down the bamboo chopsticks in her hand and indifferently swept her gaze over that person's face. She sneered. So it's young Master Ding. Ding Yun pointed at him. You. Why are you here? Mo Yen reached out to hold Jojo's small hand and coldly glanced at him. Of course I'm here to accompany my wife for a meal. Dao Wuji inexplicably felt that the seductive young master in front of him was probably a little heart-wrenching. Because the other party's expression inexplicably changed, and his expression instantly turned ugly. Move aside, all of you move aside. Scram! Don't block the door. What's all the noise about? Young Master Ding flew into a rage out of humiliation. He turned around and flicked his sleeves. Several ferocious men who had rushed in were immediately swept away by a powerful force. Bang! 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 They all fell to the ground, their noses bruised and their faces swollen. Surround them. Behind them, a large group of guards rushed in with a wave of their hand. The large group of people surrounded the entire hall of the inn so tightly that not even a drop of water could trickle through. They can't even have a peaceful meal. Hu Shichen was speechless as he looked at the crowd that had barged in. Under the orders of the manor lord's wife, we are here to bring Fairy Yellow Crane back to the manor. The leader of the guards shouted and raised his hand. Take her down. At this time, young Master Ding had already walked to Arbor's side and asked with a smile, Jojo, do you need help? Why are you here? This was the question that Xiao Mu wanted to ask. She had nearly forgotten to ask after being interrupted by that group of royal guards. Me? Ah. I'm here to collect debts. Young Master Ding said with a smile, it's very difficult to do business these days. It won't do if you don't keep a close eye on them. Oh. The little stoic responded and stood up to say to everyone, let's leave after we finish eating. The frightened commoners in the lobby and the shopkeepers who only peeked their heads out of the cabinets looked dumbfoundedly at this young lady who suddenly stood up. Could it be that this young lady didn't see the group of people who had barged in? She called her companions to leave so easily. Just how big of a heart was this? At this time, the leader of the guard's complexion also turned ashen, and his gaze landed on Huang He. Chapter 2107. Seeing her sitting there motionless, the head of the guard simply had nowhere to vent his anger, and angrily rebuked, what are you all standing there for? Take him down. If there's any resistance, kill him on the spot. Arbor coldly snorted, what a big show. What a big show of power. Let me give you a piece of advice, if you don't want to die, then hurry and leave. Fairy Ginkgo also stood up, her slender waist swaying slightly as she seductively threw a coquettish glance at the head of the guards. The head of the guard stared blankly for a moment, then hurriedly regained his senses. His cold face flushed red, and he hurriedly shouted angrily, hurry and surround them. Yellow Crane, I advise you to surrender without putting up a fight, don't cause any more trouble. Just as he finished speaking, a black figure slightly swayed in front of them, and instantly arrived in front of the head of the guards. Where's all this nonsense coming from? Mo Lian's palm slapped over, heavily landing on the other party's chest, directly sending that head of the guards flying backwards, crashing out of the door with a loud bang. After being stunned for a while, the head of the guards was unable to crawl up, and just as he raised his head, he started coughing out blood. Mo Lian's expression was indifferent as she stood at the entrance of the inn. With a light flick of her sleeve, the entire row of people standing there, along with their head of the guards, all fell out of the inn, like a human pyramid, yo, they piled up into a pile. After cleaning up the eyesores in front of him, Prince Mo turned around, and his figure flashed back to his wifey's side. Naturally holding her little hand, he chuckled softly, let's go, Jojo, let's not bother with those idle people. Arbor nodded her little head, and her little hand was held by him as they walked towards the side room on the second floor. Fairy Yellow Crane's head drooped, her face listless. I've already escaped to here, I didn't expect that she still wouldn't let me go. Hearing this, Arbor raised her little hand high and patted the back of her head. I'm here for everything. What are you afraid of? Fairy Yellow Crane was taken aback for a moment, then turned her head and smiled at her. Isn't that so? We'll deal with whatever comes our way. At worst, we'll just kill them all. Fairy Ginkgo chuckled. If it wasn't for the perverse and ruthless look in her eyes, everyone in the hall would have thought that she was just joking. After everyone entered the room, they sat down in a circle. Arbor extended his hand and retrieved a wisp of soul remembrance from the storage talisman. He glanced back at little Tai Sui and said, "Let this dungeon rain stones." Little Tai Sui raised an eyebrow slightly. "Are you sure? This guy is just a spiritual sense body. With this rain of stones, he will definitely turn into ashes." "No, no, no, no." The Shantian Prefecture's prefecture lord, Gung Pengcheng, was so scared that his entire body was trembling. He knelt in the dungeon and continuously kowtowed to Arbor. At this moment, he no longer cared about his dignity. All he wanted was his life. Unfortunately, Arbor didn't have the slightest bit of pity for him. He glanced at little Tai Sui and reached out to pound the dungeon. "Then let me do it." Gung Pengcheng still didn't understand the meaning of Arbor's words. In the next second, that spiritual sense body seemed to have been pierced by a sharp blade. A transparent hole appeared in its body, and it held its head and screamed. Arbor silently retracted his spiritual sense and glanced at him with a sneer. "Why haven't you told the truth yet?" I'll confess, I'll confess, I'll confess." "Crown Princess, what do you want to play?" "This lowly one will definitely tell you everything he knows." Arbor looked at him coldly. "Tell me, who are you working for? Why are you biting me so hard?" Chapter 2108. It's all my fault. It's me who targeted the Crown Princess. It's me who repeatedly sent people to kill the Crown Princess, ah. Gung Pengcheng's spiritual consciousness avatar let out a miserable shriek. Arbor looked at him expressionlessly and coldly. "Now that things have come to this, you'd better confess the truth. Who exactly are you working for? Speak." She didn't believe this person's lies. If one were to talk about interactions, before she stepped into Shantian Prefecture, she had never met the prefecture lord of Shantian Prefecture in her previous life. What she was sure of was that a person could not develop hatred for no reason. Mo Lian's face was also cold as he enunciated each word. "In the lower star domain, once you find this little lass, you must make sure that she doesn't have everything that goes her way, living like a piece of trash. She'll struggle at death's door like a dog and never see hope or end. She can't have the chance to go to the divine continent. Once any talent emerges, there's no need to wait for her to grow up miserably. Just obliterate her on the spot." These were memory fragments extracted from Lu Yiji's soul remembrance, and he still remembered each word very clearly. Now that he read it to Gung Pengcheng, his voice was low and pleasant, but even Endless Blade, who had very thick nerves, could hear the ruthlessness in his voice. Arbor suddenly smiled and nodded. His spiritual consciousness condensed into a sword and pierced straight through Gung Pengcheng's shoulder. "I've always been very curious about how I've offended you. Why did you have to mess with me like this? Making me live a miserable life and struggling at death's door like a dog, is this the perfect life path you guys planned for me? Who would have thought that after I crawled out of hell, I would no longer follow the path you guys planned for me? My life would be like a wild horse that broke free of its reins and completely broke away from your control. So, you didn't have the patience to wait for me to come to a miserable end. You were anxious to get rid of me, right?" Cough, cough, cough. Gung Pengcheng's spiritual consciousness avatar completely withered and collapsed in the dungeon. His eyes lost focus as he muttered to himself, don't kill me, don't kill me. "You're from Tianyun, right?" Arbor said coldly. "Are Fan Chioha and Fan Gu your subordinates?" Gung Pengcheng shook his head in a daze. "You still want to lie?" Mo Lien couldn't help but get angry. "You really won't cry until you see the coffin. Since that's the case, I'll roast your spiritual sense body for 49 days and turn you into a tonic from my purple flame divine fire." Gung Pengcheng's pupils constricted, and his mind completely cleared. He struggled and shouted, "Your Highness, spare my life! Your Highness, spare my life!" Old Gung, made a move on the crown princess in a moment of confusion. But before that, I didn't even know the true identity of the crown princess. That's why. Shut up! Mo Lien shouted angrily. I don't know his identity. These words might work on children, but not on them. From the time he and Jojo were betrothed to the completion of the wedding ceremony, everything was under the eyes of the world. If Shuntian Prefecture's prefecture lord wanted to keep an eye on Jojo, how could he not know these details? He was probably afraid that Jojo would grow, so he did it on purpose. A cluster of burning purple flames suddenly fell on Prefecture Lord Gung's spiritual consciousness avatar. The scorching flames coldly covered his body, and a feeling of ice and fire alternating gradually spread in his heart. That burning sensation was truly too unbearable. Chapter 2109. Manor Lord Gung roared loudly, rolling back and forth in the small dungeon wrapped in a layer of purple flames. Arbor watched coldly for a while, wondering inwardly, who on earth is it that made Gung Pengcheng suffer so much and still continues to protect him? She simply didn't believe that it was Gung Pengcheng's fault that he tried to kill her in both the past and present lives. How could there be love and hatred in this world for no reason? The person hiding behind him was too well hidden. Perhaps. Why don't we search his soul? Arbor turned to look at Mo Lien and Yuan Shichen. Can we search his soul based on his current appearance? Yuan Shichen nodded. We can, but after we search his soul, he'll soon die and will no longer be able to live in this world. Before Arbor could react, a tiny person huddled in a corner of the dungeon hastily crawled up and said anxiously, "No, don't search my soul. My soul, you can't search it. Do you want to search it?" No one would accept Gung Pengcheng's suggestion. Yuan Shichen only turned to look at Arbor, her expression telling her to make the decision. Arbor nodded resolutely. Search. She wanted to see who it was that insisted on making enemies of her in both the past and present lives. Yuan Shichen reached out her hand, and the dungeon was stuck to her palm. Gung Pengcheng's soul was trembling in fear. He kowtowed to Yuan Shichen and said, "No, don't kill me, really don't kill me. I've confessed everything, please let me go." As a terrifying force cut into the depths of his soul, Gung Pengcheng's body of spiritual sense gradually became weak and transparent. His whole body was like a small white flower swaying in a storm, on the verge of collapse. He looked somewhat pitiful. Suddenly, Gung Pengcheng's soul let out an earth-shattering roar. Yuan Shichen's body swayed slightly, and she actually retreated a few steps. Seeing this, Mo Lien supported him with one hand. With a wave of her sleeve, several purple flames soared and surrounded Gung Pengcheng, who was waiting for an opportunity to escape. Just now, because of the impact of the two forces, the earth pillars that were added to the prison had collectively disappeared. This cunning fellow had almost escaped. Yuan Shichen shook his head and looked angrily at Gung Pengcheng. There are at least 9 restrictions in this person's consciousness. I can't search his soul for now. 9 restrictions. What was he guarding against? Xiao Mu's eyes narrowed slightly. The more this was the case, the more interested she was in the things hidden in this person's brain. This Shuntian Prefecture's prefecture lord was truly generous. Since that was the case, Arbor didn't want to talk to him anymore. He directly grabbed the person who was being burned by the purple flames. Since you're so unafraid of death, then I'll let you suffer a total of 49 days of burning. After saying that, he no longer looked at that person happily and directly stuffed Gung Pengcheng back into the storage talisman. Yuan Shichen smiled faintly. I'm guessing that he won't be able to make it through tonight. Meanwhile, the Emperor of Zhangzhou was sitting on the throne with hundreds of steps high above. He was staring at the painting presented by the third prince with a gloomy expression. Have you found out? It's true. The person that my fourth brother likes is probably the fiancé of the crown prince of the divine land. The emperor of Zhangzhou only felt that his head was throbbing. His fourth son had come back. It didn't matter if he was not close to his old father. But now, what had happened? Chapter 21:10. The third prince even described the painting that Duan Yu had hidden under the desk with embellishment. In the end, he added, this son also discovered this painting by accident. That woman truly has limpid autumn waters and jade-like bones, and her icy beauty is unique in the world. This fake painting probably didn't even bring out 40% of her charm. No wonder fourth brother would be so attentive to this beauty. It's just that this fourth brother is too ruthless to actually poison the original painting. One of eldest brother's personal attendants was implicated like this and died from the poison. While the third prince prattled on incessantly. Crown Prince Rongli merely stood barehanded in front of Zhangzhou's emperor without uttering a word. The second prince was all smiles as he looked up at the third prince from time to time, a meaningful smile on his lips. Their third brother how should they describe his temperament? On the bright side, he was frank, but on the other hand, he was brainless, easily angered, and impulsive. Tsk, royal father's expression was truly unsightly. Enough! Zhangzhou's emperor shouted angrily and waved his hand at the eunuch on his left. Go call old fourth over. Seeing the emperor's wrath, the third prince kept quiet out of fear. Zhangzhou's emperor turned to look at the silent crown prince and suddenly asked, what is crown prince's opinion? Crown Prince Rongli stepped forward and bowed respectfully. Royal father, this son believes that fourth brother's actions are truly a bit foolish. If it's as old third said, and fourth brother secretly hid the painting of the future crown princess of the divine province, then I'm afraid it's not conducive to the peaceful coexistence of Zhangzhou and the divine province. Nowadays, the situation in the world is changing unpredictably. Outside the three provinces, foreign countries and barbarian tribes frequently eye us covetously. Although Ming province and us established a peaceful alliance 100 years ago, the vicissitudes of life have changed many times since then. How can we know if Ming province is still as reliable as it was in the past? Although the three provinces coexist, everyone knows that the divine province is the strongest. Even though the divine province experienced that coup many years ago, it still stands at the pinnacle of the world. This son earnestly requests royal father to issue a decree to select a consort for fourth brother. This son believes that fourth brother merely has a youthful temperament and is young and dissolute. In the future, if this matter can be settled, it will definitely be a blessing for our Tsang province. The Zhangzhou emperor looked at Rongli thoughtfully, nodded, and turned to the second prince. Second prince, what do you think? I think the crown prince is right. Rongli silently lowered his eyes and sneered in his heart. His second brother's temperament was completely different from his third brother's, but his ostrich-like behavior was something that he despised. At least third brother still had some guts. As for second brother, he couldn't help but chuckle. Your Majesty, the fourth prince has arrived. All of you can leave for now. Let fourth brother come in. Emperor Zhangzhou waved his hand. Your son will take his leave. Rongli and the other two bowed, then turned and walked out of the hall. The three of them saw their fourth brother walk in through the 4 vermilion doors that were wide open. Beneath her peerlessly beautiful appearance, she was dressed in a moon-white robe. Her long hair hung down to her waist and was not tied up. She looked lazy and undisciplined, but her eyes were sharp. When Rongli glanced at her, he felt a chill run down his spine. Why was her gaze so sharp and piercingly cold? Greetings, royal father. As the three of them left the hall, the 4 doors slowly closed. They could only vaguely hear their fourth brother's clear voice. Chapter 21:11. After Rongli walked out of the hall, he glanced at his second brother and third brother but didn't speak. Third prince couldn't keep his composure, so he hastily grabbed Crown Prince Ron Li's sleeve as soon as he walked out of the hall. Eldest brother, what do you think royal father will do? Why did you say something about fourth brother taking a consort just now? Shouldn't we tell royal father to severely punish this person who doesn't know the severity of things? As his eldest brother, I naturally can't watch him continue to make mistakes. Ron Li smiled faintly. A person who bitterly loves the future crown princess of the divine province won't have a good ending. Third prince was fuming with rage. Shouldn't you be harshly complaining to royal father at a time like this? Mentioning those troublesome things means you're still pleading for leniency for him. If royal father really has the intention of taking a consort for him and marrying a young lady from a prestigious family, then wouldn't he look down on us brothers even more in the future? After all, he has already inherited the Devil Emperor's bloodline, and all the patrician families in Phoenix Emperor City are eagerly waiting to climb up the social ladder. Old Third don't fret over there. Second prince chuckled as he patted third prince's shoulder. He turned to the crown prince and said, Eldest brother, third brother, I obtained several bottles of excellent wine 2 days ago. I wonder if you two could do me the honor of drinking a few cups with us three brothers. You're still in the mood to drink? Third prince fumed with rage. Okay. The crown prince nodded with a smile. The main hall instantly sunk into silence. After Duan Yu entered, he merely gave a simple bow to the emperor before silently standing at the foot of the steps. The great emperor looked at him with an exasperated expression. After a while, he picked up the fake painting and threw it at Duan Yu. Look at it yourself. Duan Yu was baffled. He picked up the painting and scrutinized it for a long time before asking with a frown, who is this? The emperor couldn't help but be amused. Old Third told me that the person in this painting is your sweetheart. However, this painting is very average and can't even compare to 3/10 of that young lady. Duan Yu threw that painting to the ground with an indifferent expression. Just them. Worthy of a painting? Who knows what kind of dogs hit the person in this painting is? I don't know him. The great emperor roared, Ron Li. Royal father called this son over just to clarify the matter of this painting. Duan Yu couldn't help laughing in exasperation. Today, imperial father called you over. Do you think imperial father wants to reprimand you because of this painting? Duan Yu remained silent as he coldly gazed at the person sitting on the throne. You are my son. You are the prince of Tsang Prefecture. What can't you have if you want it? Do you think you can get what you want by looking at a painting all day long? Duan Yu's expression was a bit odd. He looked up at his own royal father and scrutinized him once more. The great emperor of the Tsangzhou continent looked like a man in his early 30s. Needless to say, the Rome family's appearance was outstanding. However, he thought that his imperial father, who was used to being high and mighty, would not be used to chatting with his son like this. Moreover, they were talking about inexplicable emotional matters. I can tell you with certainty that with your current cowardly appearance, you won't be able to obtain anything in the future, the great emperor of the Tsangzhou continent rebuked angrily. So what if she's the crown princess of the divine province? You're the son of my Tsangzhou continent's emperor. You don't lack any status, wait. Chapter 21:12. If you don't fight or snatch, how will you obtain what you want? Tsangzhou's emperor said coldly. Duan Yu carefully scrutinized his father's expression. He felt like his father was a bit deranged right now and was in an extremely strange state. I don't want to fight, Duan Yu said indifferently. Duan Yu said very indifferently, do you think that everything in this world can be obtained by merely competing and robbing? But if you fight, you'll at least have a slim chance of survival. If you don't fight or snatch, you'll have nothing. Tsangzhou's emperor looked like he was exasperated at his son's failure to live up to his expectations as he sized up his foolish son. He looked like he couldn't get through, and just looking at him made him angry. Disappointing thing. You inherited the Devil Emperor's bloodline, so you'll definitely be the strongest person in our clan in the future. The entire Zhangzhou's future will be shouldered by you. Yet you can't even handle a little girl. Do you think you can get what you want by secretly drawing a painting and looking at it all day long? You're simply downright stupid. Duan Yu glanced at Zhangzhou's emperor. Royal father, you look like you can't get what you want. Did you not obtain the love of your life when you were young? Zhangzhou's emperor. You punk, father is telling you about your lousy affairs right now. What nonsense was he spouting? Duan Yu looked at him deeply. Royal father, you couldn't have fought with the current emperor of the divine province for a wife before, right? It had to be said that Duan Yu's words came true. Just by looking at Zhangzhou's ashen expression, Duan Yu knew that his guess was correct. No wonder he used that gaze to size him up. How was he sizing up Duan Yu? He was clearly looking at his past self. Duan Yu looked at Zhangzhou's emperor with a spurious smile and said, Royal father, don't overthink it. I won't walk the path of fighting. You probably fought and snatched back then, right? Duan Yu started stabbing his royal father's heart again. He coldly swept Zhangzhou's emperor a glance and said with a faint smile, but what's the use of fighting? Didn't you return disappointed in the end? Rong Xian felt like he was about to explode from anger because of his son. Poking at his sore spot in such a leisurely and indifferent manner was simply hateful. Emperor Zhangzhou seemed to see the back of the beautiful woman who had left him all those years ago. In that instant, he actually stared blankly at Duan Yu. Duan Yu naturally wouldn't wait for him to recover his senses. Although he had followed his mother back to Tsang Prefecture, deep down, he was still very resistant to the Tsang Prefecture emperor. After saying this, Duan Yu turned to walk out of the main hall. If there is nothing else, this son will take his leave first. The Zhangzhou emperor shot up from his seat and glared at his son. This unfilial son. He hadn't even finished speaking when his muddle-headed son hurriedly turned around and left. Was there such an urgent matter? Do you still have any respect for your father? Staring at Duan Yu's departing figure, the great emperor of Zhangzhou stared blankly for a long while before letting out a long sigh and slumping into his chair, somewhat dispirited. As far as the eye could see, the hall was completely empty. He didn't know why, but his heart also felt a little empty. In his hazy state, he seemed to be able to see that woman's beautiful smile swaying in front of him. Sigh. The past was already in the past, and it was simply impossible to retrieve it. Chapter 21:13. After Duan Yu exited the main hall, he looked up at the afterglow of the setting sun before walking toward Taiji Palace. Compared to Taiji Palace, he actually preferred the slightly more remote South Chiao Hall. At least when he was in South Chiao Hall, he didn't feel as empty and frustrated as when he was in Taiji Palace. That Taiji Palace was too empty. He really didn't like it. He slowly walked along the towering palace walls. Duan Yu wasn't in a hurry at all, and his footsteps were also very slow. Suddenly, a person with a lowered head walked over from the corner of the palace walls and nearly bumped into him. Duan Yu swiftly retreated 2 steps to avoid this collision. The person was taken aback, and when he looked up at him, his eyes instantly emitting a glint. Your Highness Prince Qianqian. Duan Yu swept him a glance and discovered that it was the young royal guard who accompanied Wu Yong to escort him back to the palace. He was a bit irritated by his rash behavior. Your Highness Prince Chen, are you returning to Taiji Palace? How about this humble one send you back? Duan Yu's figure flashed and floated past him. With his speed, if he wanted to get away from certain things, it was absolutely impossible for others to catch up to him. As a result, the young royal guard could only dazedly stay where he was and hang his head dejectedly. He only wanted to send his highness off. Was this also wrong? My Qiao's section break, Yuan Shichen's conjecture was correct. It wasn't even night yet, but Shuntian Prefecture's Prefecture Lord Gung Pengcheng, who had been tormented and shaken to his soul, was already impatient to confess. Arbor pulled him out of the storage talisman and coldly looked at him. Speak. She had wasted nearly a day with this old man and was already very irritated, so she didn't feel like continuing to be long-winded with him. I'll give you one last chance. Tell me everything you know, word for word. Spare me, spare me. Crown Princess, Your Highness the Crown Prince, can you first remove these layers of purple flames on this humble one's body? He was simply about to be burned to death. These purple flames made him suffer immensely. In the end, even with his tenacious willpower, he was unable to resist this wave of trampling and could only submit to the little devil in front of him. A lowly prisoner actually dares to make conditions with this crown prince? Mo Lien gave a cold laugh. Purple flames appeared on his fingertips again. Seeing that he was about to increase the intensity of the flame, Gung Pengcheng's spiritual sense body immediately screamed in fear. I'll tell you, I'll tell you. Gung Pengcheng knew that this matter could no longer be concealed even if he wanted to. Thus, under Mo Lien's cold gaze, she braced herself and said, Crown Princess, you guessed it right. This lowly one has indeed been working for Master. It's just that this lowly one doesn't understand why Master must target the Crown Princess. Who's your master? Arbor felt like his heart was about to jump out of his chest when he asked. Soon, soon. She was just half a step away from finding out who it was in her previous life that forced her to grow up according to their planned growth trajectory. This problem that had troubled her for so many years was about to be easily solved. I don't know my master's name. Gung Pengcheng's words instantly made Arbor's heart sink. Seeing her unworried expression, Gung Pengcheng hurriedly added, but he's definitely a man. Although I don't know his age and appearance. But from his voice, he's still quite young. I'll sleep and wake up to make up for it. Chapter 21:14. Every time he came to issue a mission, he would just stand there from afar, and a maidservant would come forward to explain clearly to us. That's why I've only seen him a few times from afar. I really can't see his appearance clearly. Arbor's lips revealed a trace of mockery as he nodded and said, Oh. Are you sure? I can be sure, I can. Shuntian Prefecture's Prefecture Lord Gung Pengcheng was like a frightened quail. He pretended to hug his transparent head with both hands and trembled as he said, Crown Princess, this lowly one is absolutely not lying. Arbor's gaze became exceptionally deep and cold as he swept a glance at Gung Pengcheng. With a wave of his sleeve, he nodded and said, At least you're sensible. The lotus-colored sleeve swept over Shuntian Prefecture's Prefecture Lord Gung Pengcheng's head, shocking him so much that his old face turned pale. Originally, he thought that the little girl's move was to put him in a situation of total annihilation. However, it didn't. She didn't do anything. It was as if her sleeve really had carelessly brushed over his head. Husband, it's getting late. Let's go back and rest. Mo Lien glanced at Gung Pengcheng and nodded. She held the little fellow's hand and walked out to the next room. Everyone also walked out one by one and returned to their respective rooms to rest. For a moment, the room was completely silent. Only Gung Pengcheng, who was placed on the table and locked in the dungeon, was left in a corner of the dungeon, muttering something to himself. It was night. The stars were completely hidden under the dark curtain of the sky. Outside, it started to drizzle again. These few days, it was as if they had entered the rainy season. Every few days, there would be a rainstorm. When they went out, they would always be wet, causing the number of small merchants and peddlers on the streets during the day to decrease by 2/3. At night, the streets were deserted. Gung Pengcheng sat in the dungeon with a dazed expression, his eyes somewhat blank. At this moment, a black shadow suddenly floated by outside the window and suddenly appeared in the room. Gung Pengcheng's spirit was roused. He opened his mouth to say something, but suddenly realized that no matter how he spoke, his voice seemed to be stuck in his throat. He couldn't even utter a single syllable. Ah. Ah. Eh. He tried to utter a few simple words, but to no avail. His spiritual sense body suddenly trembled, and a bad premonition slid through his heart. That vicious little girl did it on purpose. She deliberately left him alone in this room, using him as bait to catch her accomplice. She knew that someone would come. Ugh. Ugh. Gung Pengcheng was a little flustered. He wanted to rush to the front of the dungeon, but he waved his hands to signal the black-clothed man not to come over. But unexpectedly, a few pieces of earth and rocks fell from the top of the dungeon, smashing him down. His spiritual sense body was greatly damaged, and his whole body became more and more transparent and ethereal. He didn't even have the strength to move a finger. The black shadow did not hesitate for long. He had already arrived in front of the table and grabbed the dungeon with one hand. His sharp eyes glanced back, and with a whoosh, he went out of the window. Gung Pengcheng's heart was filled with anxiety, but he couldn't say anything. He could only watch as the man took him away along with the dungeon. After walking for about half a li, they entered an abandoned house. The man closed the door, and then looked down at Gung Pengcheng in the dungeon. He sneered and said, "You actually made yourself look like a ghost. TSK, you're really useless." Chapter 21:15. If Master hadn't sensed that your spiritual sense had been attacked by an external force and sensed that you might be in danger, I wouldn't have been able to find you. I wouldn't have followed that spiritual wave to find you. The black-clothed man crossed his arms and said coldly, "Gung Pengcheng, you're really getting worse and worse. You can't even deal with a few young people. What can you do on a normal day?" Gung Pengcheng still hadn't recovered. Sitting in the dungeon, he couldn't help but curse in his heart. Idiot, idiot, idiot. If those people were really young people, would it be possible for his soul to be seized by them? Could he have become as miserable as he was now? This person didn't even know that he was in a desperate situation. However, he couldn't even protect himself, let alone the person in front of him. Gung Pengcheng sighed. No wonder the little girl was willing to leave him in the room like this, and wasn't worried that he would leak the secret of her spiritual paradise. Because he couldn't do anything at all. If that girl had the secret of the spiritual paradise, and he couldn't reveal it to that person, then in the future, that person might also suffer a great loss in the hands of that damned girl. Damn it! Gung Pengcheng was very depressed, but at this moment, he was completely helpless. The black-clothed man in front of him continued to mock him. "If it wasn't for the fact that you still have some use, I think Master would have given you up. But you're already like this now. If you want to help Master accomplish anything, it's completely impossible." The black-clothed man sneered, "Who was that you in Shantian Prefecture? Why aren't you talking? Could it be that you were smashed silly by those stones just now? Useless thing." At this point, the black-clothed man felt that there was something wrong with Gung Pengcheng. Because from the time they entered the room until now, a full half an hour had passed. And Gung Pengcheng hadn't said a word from beginning to end. Wasn't this a bit strange? Gung Pengcheng. Why aren't you talking? Gung Pengcheng was suffering from speechlessness, and he couldn't point out anything to the fool in front of him. The black-clothed man frowned. He strolled to the table and lowered his head to look at Manor Lord Gung, who seemed to be on the verge of death. His eyes revealed traces of mockery. "What Manor Lord of Shantian Prefecture? You can't even compare to me, a slave who follows Master." Back then, Master was really blind to actually choose such an ugly thing like you. A trace of anger flashed across Gung Pengcheng's eyes. If it wasn't for the fact that he had followed that person for so many years and was one of that person's rare confidants, he would have already long ago what? Gung Pengcheng couldn't help but smile bitterly. At this moment, he couldn't even lift a finger, so how could he talk about punishing the arrogant person in front of him? Suddenly, Gung Pengcheng's eyes widened as he stared at the man's back with a strange and frightened expression. His mouth fell open. Seeing Gung Pengcheng's strange expression, the black-clothed man frowned in disdain. "Don't worry, I won't kill you. I'll bring you back to see Master. As for how to deal with you, it's naturally up to Master to decide." As soon as the man finished speaking, he saw that Gung Pengcheng was still abnormally frightened. He couldn't help but snort coldly and wanted to say a few words of mockery to this former high and mighty manor lord of Shantian Prefecture. Unexpectedly, an ice-cold hand reached out from behind him and firmly grasped his neck. "Who is your master?" A faint voice sounded from the side. "Make up for yesterday's 2 chapters. Chapter 21:16. That person turned his neck stiffly and glanced to the side, only to see a plainly dressed young girl standing not far from him, coldly watching him. The black-clothed man made a sound that was similar to a turkey being twisted by its neck. Mo Lien glanced at him coldly and swept the black cloth on his face to the ground with a wave of her hand. This was the face of a commoner that wouldn't make a splash in a crowd. Arbor glanced at him coldly and took a few steps forward. A sharp white icicle suddenly appeared in her small hand. What do you want to do?" "Ah." The black-clothed man looked at her with a face full of terror, his entire body uncontrollably trembling. "What do I want to do?" Arbor glanced at him coldly and said expressionlessly, "What do you think?" "Ah." That person's scream was instantly stuck in his throat when Mo Lien tightened her grip on his neck. The icicle in Arbor's hand had already slid down inch by inch from the back of that person's ear. Her hand that was used to using needles and knives didn't make any sound when she cut that person's skin. Her strength was also very fast and accurate, cutting down half an inch below that person's skin. The black-clothed man's neck was held in Mo Lien's hand and he couldn't even tremble if he wanted to. He could only stiffly hang in the air like a dead fish. Mo Lien very disdainfully extended her arm and pushed that person far away. She even knitted her brows and coldly said, "Unbearably stinky." Xiao Mu blinked her large eyes and looked up at her dear husband. Her hand sped up, peeling off that person's fake face with a swish. TSK, you really don't know what's good for you." Kuchen chuckled and walked up to scrutinize the black-clothed person. "Yo! And it's a woman. Wow, so impressive, so impressive. Let me see." Limitless Blade hurriedly came forward, admiring the woman in front of him as if he was watching a live animal. At this time, the man in black was already scared out of his wits. His whole body was trembling, and even his eyes had lost focus. He just looked at Arbor casually. Arbor was very impatient. He swept his palm over and landed heavily on that person's face. "Stop pretending. Your acting is so bad. Do you still want people to believe you?" The woman, whose eyes were originally unfocused, was slapped so hard that her left cheek swelled up, and her eyes became extremely fierce and evil. "You little bitch. Shameless bitch. My master won't let you off. Just kill me. Don't even think about getting the slightest bit of information from me." She cursed like a madwoman, her eyes emitting traces of poisonous light. Mo Lien loosened her grip and threw the woman to the ground. She took a clean handkerchief and slowly wiped her hands. She threw the handkerchief at that person's feet, and a cluster of black flames instantly spread from the handkerchief, burning it to ashes. The fire also sprang up from the woman's feet and instantly enveloped her in layers of holy fire. "Ah! Ah! Ah!" The woman screamed in agony and rolled around on the ground. The black flames were very mysterious. They didn't burn anything in the room. They only enveloped the woman and roasted her with all their might, as if trying to drive her soul out of her body. Arbor pattered to her husband's side and raised a hand to calm him down. She didn't care what this woman was saying. "You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.